Hello, everyone. I wanted to start just a few minutes early because a few new technical things going on, so I just want to make sure everything is working. Uh, can everyone spam the chat, please? Because I'm trying to see if this chat on the screen will work. And okay, I'm not sure how far I want it to go up. Maybe only up that far? That seems reasonable. Okay. Can you read the chat easily? I have no idea. Like, the preview is on a much bigger screen than probably it is. Or maybe it's a smaller screen because it's sort of a smaller part of my screen. The background is the same as the background for the first setting discussion. I had no time to make a new one. It's a little small. Here, let me try and change it. Okay, so I thought that was a little small, and I had changed it. But apparently this has no save feature, so I needed to change it, but it didn't save. Okay, let's see here. So we'll do that. Press OK. Well, that didn't work at all. That's the opposite of what I wanted. I think I didn't paste the whole thing or something. Let me try that again. Oh yeah, I totally missed out on pasting the whole thing. Let me just This is why I wanted to start the stream a little bit early. There we go. Is that better in terms of size? Welcome everyone. Sick. Great. Awesome. The light color on the Okay, let's make a darker background, I think, for the thing. Yeah, let's do that. And then yeah. Just mess with this one last time. Because I totally agree with you, Riff. I see that as well, that is a problem. So let's do that. So now we have a sort of... That didn't do what I thought it would do at all. It's supposed to have a darker background to it, but it doesn't. That's weird. Well, anyways, it looks fine. And we're at 2:30 now, so we should probably start. It does? Okay. I don't really see what I tried to do, but it's fine. Let me bring that up as well, so I can have everything ready to go. All right, so introduction. Introduction. So as the description says, and I'm sure you're aware, it changed the font. Weird. I don't know what happened there, but it's fine. We'll deal with it later. Uh, in this discussion stream, we'll be discussing the process of testing puzzles. Now, I think this is actually a really interesting whole process, and we were talking about it a lot during the difficulty creep stream where we were talking about like feedback is really important for knowing whether a puzzle is too difficult and being honest with the feedback, because a lot of people don't be honest, and then it sort of is this big feedback loop of people are making sort of meh puzzles and then inspiring meh puzzles because, well, if someone else did it, then it's fine to do it. Uh, Welcome to all the new people, by the way. I haven't been looking at the chat as much in the setting discussion streams as these solving streams, and I'm sure you understand why. Hello, Rock Rat, and uh, Sonic is newish. Daniel's been with us for a while. Elaine hasn't been with us that long. I mean, I think I've seen your name in the discussion chats before, but I haven't said hello before. So hello and welcome. Uh, and we will probably get started. The first guest we have was going to be Jovial, but unfortunately we have to settle for Niverio today. I'm just joking. Niverio is great. We've had him on both the difficulty creep and the original setting discussion about getting started. So we are we are happy to have him and happy to discuss with him. So there's a little bit more editing, finagling, and audio and stuff like that. So we're gonna start a voice call with Niverio, and I don't need to be on the call in video. But
Hello.
okay, I can hear you. That's the first step. Now, can you guys hear him? And I need to do that. That looks perfect already.
Yeah, nice. That's good.
Wow, that was
I know.
easy.
Come on, Joe. Yeah, Discord is thankfully a nice program with lots of features with easy to use interface in most cases. So
Yeah.
yeah, hello. I am Niverio. I'm like, if you guys don't know me, I'm a member of the community for more than a year now, a little bit, and I have been testing puzzles for over a year as well. Both my own puzzles and some other puzzles from lots of other setters in the community. So yeah, I thought to myself I can share some of my experiences here.
Yeah, I think this will be a really useful discussion for
Wait,
newer
my camera is
setters.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, newer setters who've tried to test their puzzle, but maybe don't know all the things you should be looking for in a puzzle because you know you should test your puzzle, but
Yeah.
what do you do, right?
I mean, I think the first thing I want to talk about is, especially as a first person, I should talk about why we test puzzles. And in my eyes, there's a golden rule of testing and like setting puzzles overall. In my eyes, you as the setter should always be the first solver of your puzzle.
Right.
Like you should never make anybody else solve your own puzzle that you just created before you, after you finish the entire setting process, take a step back and solve from scratch from the entire start. Because the point of testing is there are lots of things there are lots of reasons why we test puzzles. The first part is to verify that your puzzle is unique. And that is that it has a unique solution. Sometimes someone can be blind. So like this first part is about your own test solving, by the way. There's
Yeah.
also the second part, which is the testing by other people. And that's also
Yeah.
a very vital part. But the most important part is that your own test solve for the puzzle.
Yeah, it's
Like
sort of
every
like
single puzzle you publish,
the alpha, beta, and full release, basically. The
yes,
alpha is sort
exactly.
of a restricted group, mainly yourself, if you don't want to torture your friends, essentially.
True. Basically, yeah, like before you publish a puzzle anywhere, in my opinion, like you can always share it with your closest friends in the community that would like to test your puzzle, of course. But for me, I would never publish a puzzle anywhere before it passed my own test solve.
Right.
So that I would, at least in my own knowledge, know that the puzzle is unique. Of course, the setter itself is a human, so they can overlook things. But in your own knowledge, the puzzle is unique. It accomplishes the things that you want the puzzle to accomplish. And overall, keeps the overall intended solution path that you put at the start of a puzzle. Which is my second point why the testing is so important. Like it keeps your puzzle setting process coherent in the sense that it is always possible at the start of setting a puzzle is that you come up with an idea and then you set a break-in for the puzzle. And then you can do that. But as you build clues over and over to the grid, it is sometimes possible that the later clues that you added to the grid can change how a solver would approach a puzzle. Sometimes a clue is so powerful that it will be more impactful on the early solve than you anticipated.
Yeah.
And this is the part where it is actually more important for other people to solve it, because as the setter yourself, you are somewhat biased, because when you set the puzzle yourself, you know what your own first step is.
Definitely.
And therefore, when you are test solving, you should always try to take a step back, like try to abort the ideas in your head that you know about the puzzle and approach it a little bit anew and see if you can deduce other stuff that you didn't think was possible in the start of the puzzle initially, but now maybe it is.
Right. I
So
think
that is the second reason.
there's a little bit of a thing I'd like to add to that. I mean, you're looking for if there are alternative paths, but also there are certain things like you might not uh, start out by not, say, pencil marking a 3-cell arrow that's completely within a box as 6, 7, 8, 9. That might be something you think maybe I shouldn't do that, but that's more of that's a gimme sort of logic. I think you should do all the gimme sort of logics that are intended, and then when it comes to like a little bit of a harder step, then you should start to think about, is there another way I can get through this part of the puzzle? Because I think everyone at some level is going to get the gimmies eventually, and they're going to get that before another harder step. But
Yeah.
and the order in which they get the gimmies, it shouldn't really matter, essentially. Just clarifying what we
Yep.
mean by looking for different paths.
Yeah, I do agree on that. But the hardest part for test solving your own puzzle is you have to switch gears in your head. Like you have to switch from the setting mentality to a solving mentality. Like if you are still test solving with a setter mentality, I think you are doing something wrong, because like then it would mean that you are just recreating the steps that you already put into the puzzle, and then the test solve is going to be relatively useless, because if you had made the mistake before earlier, you are not going to spot it, because you are going to go through the same logic problem. And like
Right.
if it's already correct, you are just going to like go through the same thing again, and you're not going to find any new information out of that test solve.
Yeah,
So
I think
sometimes,
there's two
yeah,
parts to that, right? There's one, you're checking the logical consistency of what you had intended to see if it is actually true, because sometimes we make mistakes, we're human, and sometimes it isn't actually true what we had thought was true. And then the second part is what you're saying is that you should approach it as a solver. Where are you looking? What deductions are you seeing? Maybe it's different than when you were setting.
yeah. And like something that might be helpful, that like I'm not a good example for this, because I almost always test solve right at when I finish setting the puzzle myself, because I'm usually way too excited to post the puzzle to testing straight away.
Right.
But something that you can do, like if you really want to make sure that you can switch from a setting perspective to a solving perspective, is just let the puzzle stay away for a couple of hours or
Yeah.
like the next day before you do your test solve. I do not do that myself, but for a newer setter, it's definitely recommended. Like I'm not a good example on that front, but it is definitely something that you can do. And basically, while you are test solving your own puzzle, another important thing to do, like this is my third point, is always give your own self feedback about if you like the progression of the puzzle.
Right.
Like when you are doing your test solve, uh, when you do solve it, like when you encounter a hard step, for example, in your puzzle that you think is going to be a sticking point, try to evaluate like if you want that sticking point to be in there. Like, do you think that step is included in the solve path for sure? Like, do you think that it still keeps the flow of the puzzle? Or like if you think that a solver is going to find it? That
Right.
is a very important question that you cannot really anticipate until you let someone else test, but can be a little bit detrimental if you are not prepared for it. Like
Yeah.
your puzzle can get very bad review initially from other people if you leave a deduction in there that you spotted, but someone else might not.
That
And
that's
therefore,
actually
you should have some empathy
that's a weird
as
sort
well.
of advice that I didn't even think about when I was putting this prompt, but a good way to get people to test your puzzles, because I know it is a chore to get people to test your puzzles when you're just starting. Not everyone gets that blue check mark immediately in Discord. A good way to get people to test your puzzles, is if they do test one, then it isn't oh, like, oh, there's a mistake. Oh, there's a step I don't like. Oh, I have to change the puzzle. Constantly that, because once that happens once, they're much less likely to actually go back to your puzzle and test a different one the next time because they're worried that that will happen again. So making sure that the thing you're putting in testing submissions is the thing you want people to be solving the first time is a great way to get people to test your puzzles in the future.
Yeah, like I agree. Like you should always have a low, like a threshold of like self-satisfaction before you put your test solve puzzle into testing. Otherwise, you can encounter such unwell situations, so to say. And other than that, like for own test solve, I do not really have anything specific to say because every puzzle is different. Like every puzzle genre is different, and the way a puzzle solves, like even just the Sudoku variants between themselves, like
Yeah.
all have some very basic core knowledge attached to them. Like the three center rows having 6, 7, 8, 9 on the head is a good example. Like crop keys cannot have 5, 7, 9 and such things. But overall, like you should just go with your intuition after a while. Like if you yourself like the puzzle, the chances are that other people will also, as long as you don't have like extremely high expectations and a really big ego or something about your own deductions in the puzzle.
Right. I mean, the other thing to mention with, I think you said when you find a sticking point, think whether you like it or not. The other thing to think about is when you find a sticking point, is there only one sort of way that you could think about this? I think it's really valuable to stop and think, is there a different way to view this step? Which is a really weird thing to do, and it does take a lot of experience, but the more times you try to do that, the better you will get at seeing a different way to view the step. And the more ways that there are to view the step, the more likely someone will be able to get that.
Yep, exactly. Like it also depends on like who is testing your puzzle.
Yeah.
Like what is your target audience for the puzzle as well as a good question. Like if you place a 4 out of 5 puzzle on testing, and then you know a solver who usually solves a 2-star puzzle, test your puzzle, and then say it's very hard. Like you should always have your own balance about like if it depends on if you know the tester's solving capability, of
Right.
course. But as the longer you spend time in Cities and Discord, the more you get to know people. And basically, like if you are setting a puzzle that codec cannot solve, there's a problem, for example. Like, of course, this is somewhat of a meme answer, but like basically, if the people that are very known in this puzzle community that are very capable solvers are really having big problems of the puzzle, try to talk with them.
Right.
Like it is always good to be in communication, and you can always improve yourself by communicating with solvers or setters. Like in this case of you as a setter, when you get your own puzzle tested, you should always, like if there's someone providing feedback to you, always talk back, ask questions for further feedback if you feel that their response was not enough and you have some certain questions. Like do not be afraid to communicate. Most of the people in Cities server who are actually testing puzzles are very welcome to provide feedback because like
Yeah.
people enjoy solving puzzles and they would be also willing to give feedback to you.
Right. And
Question for Niverio, by the way, I just see that from with.
well, we'll get to that in a second. But
Yeah.
you said oh god, I lost it now. Oh, you said that you might not know what people usually solve because you might not be as experienced with the solvers that test your puzzle, but you can, like communication, you can always just ask like, uh, I'm just wondering because I intended this for a sort of 4-star, 5-star audience. What do you normally solve? Like, what are you comfortable with? That's a completely valid question, right?
Yes, definitely. And it is also important to know that like when you are posting a puzzle to testing submissions, like this is what I do almost all the time. Like just provide an estimated difficulty on it, just so that the solver who is going to take that puzzle on has a vague expectation. That expectation might be, of course, off the charts, but at least on the extreme scale, like for example, someone who solves a 1 or 2-star puzzle will know not to approach a 5-star puzzle. So like if you
Right.
just put at the like it is very easy to do, just write estimated difficulty 4 out of 5.
I
Like
mean,
that gives an impression to the testers as well. What to
I would
expect.
give a suggestion that maybe don't say the puzzle is easier than it could be, because saying that it's like this is estimated 2 out of 5, this is estimated 1 out of 5, that gives a very like different impression than, and it isn't as useful as someone saying this is a difficulty 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5, which tells some people don't solve this puzzle, but 1 out of 2, 2 out of 5, I said 1 out of 2, but 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5, anyone probably could look at that and say, oh, I'll probably solve this one. But if it's higher than that, you really don't want that audience to be solving that, because it's just putting them in a bad place.
Yeah, it is weird in that regard, yeah. But you should always have your own idea. Anyway, like I'm looking at the hour, and I'm like, this is half of my time, so I want to move on to the other point because I actually want to talk about more about testing other people's puzzles as well.
Yeah.
And like this is something that I really want to do a little bit more because, like, I am one of the people who have tested puzzles a lot more than most other people. Like there are so many people in the community that set a lot, but that do not solve a lot. And like I sometimes feel like when I'm watching some other newer people test puzzles, that like when I'm looking at puzzle testing feedback, there's almost always relatively good feedback, but there's also sometimes like I read something and I'm like, well, like you should be more helpful. You can be more helpful. And what do I tend to do when I'm test solving a puzzle is what I want to approach. First of all, like when I'm in a good mood, like when I'm not really lazing around and I'm just way too lazy to open stream, I usually tend to either do a solve stream on Twitch or on Discord if I can.
Right.
Because I really feel like letting someone watch your solve is going to give them the best impression about if their own intended solve path is being kept. And during the solve, the setter of the puzzle can also ask questions about you so that they can guide you if they want to. Like that's not something that always has to be done, but they will see how you solve the puzzle, and that's going to give them so much valuable information about if their expectations of the puzzle are being met in terms of difficulty, in terms of flow, like if there's a sticking point or if that sticking point is being kept, etc. So that's the first thing I do. I try to stream. Second of all, if this is regardless of if I stream or not, when I'm solving a puzzle, I mentally keep track of steps in that puzzle that I particularly like or particularly dislike.
Right.
So that I can give that opinion at the end of the solve. Like sometimes if I'm really getting too frustrated or something that is like very mind-blowing, I will just write that in the chat straight at that point as well. Like I'm going to say, oh, like this is a very clever deduction. Like this is very, very good. I really approve of this.
I do
like
that
basically
often.
I try to be in a communicative way. Like when I'm solving, I try to have the voice chat one open, and if there's a step that I'm really good extremes on about, like either extremely good or extremely bad, I take a quick break, go to voice chat one, write a quick brief opinion, and then continue to solve. And second of all, like if the person that you are not, like if you are solving the puzzle from is not able to watch your stream, when I finish solving the puzzle, I provide a short feedback. Like I DM them or just go to puzzle testing feedback. Like there's always ways to communicate with the setter. It can be DMs, any other server, etc.
Yeah.
Like I just go there, provide my finishing time. Like if I did some coloring on the grid, I also try to publish a solve grid. Like I do that to indicate to the setter that okay, like I use colors to disambiguate this part better. Like this is not something that I like to do when I'm solving a puzzle that is done. Like I know it is very well tested. Like I might remove the colors in such puzzles, for example. But when I'm testing something, I tend to keep the colors in there to indicate to the setter that is going to see that picture later that like I use colors to help in that specific part of the solve. So that's another type of advice that I can give to testers. Like if you are using a particular method to solve a puzzle, either write it out to the setter or just keep the indicators that you use in the solve so that the setter will also understand that you used that method in that part as well. Like if you use a set at the start of a puzzle, just keep the set coloring in there.
Yeah,
to
or
see
if
like
you
maybe
really
the set
hate it,
doesn't move
then
and exists, for
go back
example.
at the end and put it back in. I'm sure you remember what the set was,
Oh
right?
yeah, or that. Like you can of course remove it in the middle and then place it back if you remember what you have
Yeah.
done. So that is one part. What else did I have in mind? Yeah, in the end, I always try to give my own difficulty level at the end as well.
Right.
Like when I always say like I agree with the estimated difficulty, or like I thought it was a little bit easier, a little bit harder, or sometimes it is not coherent enough. Sometimes I think a puzzle is a 3-star puzzle difficulty, but there's one step in there which is like 4.5.
Right.
And then when that happens, I also tend to separate those two. Like
Yeah, me too.
if there's a specific step that you really found very extremely hard, like specifically mention that step as well to the setter, because
Well,
that
sometimes
those
that
steps,
step isn't actually supposed to be there,
yeah,
and
sometimes,
yeah,
but that
and then they're
also
like, "Oh,
tells the setter,
this is very valuable information that like your evaluation might be higher than what it actually should be because there's this random step that you found that isn't actually supposed to be there. Maybe I need to make that part easier so you can see the actual step." Anyways, continue.
yeah, and also like that is also good feedback for the setter, because that means that their intended step is not seen by the solver,
Yes.
for example. And that is also like that might help them telegraph that better for next time, or they can just laugh at you like you're being blind. Like if you are comfortable with the
Sometimes.
setter that you know, you can of course have some snarky comments with them as long as you know that it's going to be well received. Um, yeah, that is the main part as well. And so like post your end screen with the indicated steps. Try to give your own feedback on difficulty, and like if you really enjoyed the puzzle, like just say that I like the puzzle. This is somewhat generic that I tend to do all the time, because most of the puzzles that I solve, like my own threshold for liking a puzzle is extremely low. Like it really takes something very very dumb to make me annoyed at a puzzle.
Right.
Uh, but like if I like something, I'm going to usually like yeah, it was a nice puzzle. It was very nice. Of course, you can go into more detail about like if you like something really really much, then I would go into more detail about like I like this very very much. Like I will also do that. But in 85% of the puzzles, I go, yeah, it was a nice puzzle. And like that it means that is indicating to me like I tested this puzzle and I had no problems with it. Like that is my way of saying like I don't think there's any step that needs to be particularly changed in this puzzle.
Right.
Is like when I say I like this puzzle and it's nice, that is my way of transmitting that. Of course, that can change from tester to tester. Uh, yeah, that is also what I include in my testing path.
Right.
Oh,
Now,
and well, okay.
there were a few things you said there that sort of indicated to me that there were a different almost procedure when you know the setter or if the setter is somewhat experienced. Is there a different procedure that you have when the setter is newer to setting?
It's not a different procedure, but like basically the newer the setter is, the more feedback I will give.
Right.
Is my idea. Like because like if I think like if I'm testing someone's debut puzzle, I will really go into detail about how I solved it and which parts that I liked. That
Right.
is mainly also to like if I'm doing this in CTC Discord, for example, that is not because like I want to verify their puzzle by 200%, which is not needed, but more about like getting them better into the community, like to remove
Yeah.
their shyness a little bit, and that like we are an engaging community. Like that's why I tend to go into more detail if I see a newer setter set a puzzle like that. In that regard,
Yeah. And they have to go
um,
through the hazing process, of course.
yeah. Like I saw, like I have done this with Malrock, for example. Like Malrock's first puzzle, I remember, like it was like this between arrow puzzle that I really really liked, and I ran to the DMs with him and like chat about him about puzzle setting and that specific puzzle for like 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And I also recommended to CTC after, and then it got featured like 2 weeks after too. Like that was pretty good, for example. And such moments are always nice, like when you have these new people which are excited to try things, and like when you also get the positive feedback from them back, like they appreciate your test solve.
Yeah.
Like that's also a very good feeling, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like donating to charity or something.
yeah. One final thing that I want to do, what I'm about to say that I do differently when I'm solving a puzzle and when I'm test solving a puzzle,
Okay.
because I have very little time left.
Yeah.
When you are test solving a puzzle, don't assume anything. Like, this is something important, because sometimes when I'm solving a puzzle from a setter that I particularly know, like codec, KNT, like these are setters that I solved at least 30 puzzles for. And like when you start to get to know a setter too well, like you are starting to anticipate what kind of deductions that setter is going to put into the puzzle.
Right.
And that is completely fine to do when you are solving their puzzle. But if you are doing a test for them, don't do any of that. Don't assume anything. Don't do any uniqueness deductions. Like, this is something that you should never do during a test solve, because the part of test solve is also to guarantee that it is a unique puzzle. And you can never like rely on the setter of the puzzle to say that it's unique.
Right.
So yeah, like that is a final thing that I want to point out, that like your solving approach, even if you know a setter too well, like try not to use that knowledge too much and try to approach a puzzle from a more neutral perspective, and you leave the subjective remarks to the feedback of the puzzle and not the
Right.
solve procedure of the puzzle.
So there's actually one more part to the process, or the topic that I don't know if you missed in like your note writing or something, but there's also the part where you're receiving feedback when you're watching someone test solve your puzzle or something like that. How do you internalize what's going on there? How do you internalize their feedback? How do you work with it as a setter?
Well, like this is a very interesting question, because I don't have a definite answer for that. Like, I will be honest, like I will take the feedback of a person I know closely way more than someone random.
Right.
Like, for example, like if I get a feedback from someone like Codec or Joey that say, like, I really didn't like this puzzle, then I will work really hard to change the puzzles like dramatically until they like it. Because I know that Codec and Joey are people that usually like my puzzles, for example.
Right.
And like if they are not liking that specific puzzle, then there's something different that I made in that puzzle that went wrong with them. And if it went wrong with them, that these are people that already know me and somewhat biased towards my puzzles already in terms of liking them, and they still did not. So that might be a red flag.
Right.
Where in terms of if there's something different, if someone different, I will take what they say and I will try to approach it more objectively if I agree with what they say.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Niverio. All those thoughts were very useful to me, and it seems like the chat agrees with you and thought they were very useful as well. So thank you so much for coming on and on short notice as well.
Thank you for having me, even
Yeah.
as a guest tester, guest tester. Yeah. Thank you for having me, and I am excited for other guests to tell their piece.
Yeah,
And have a great
hopefully we'll see you
stream.
at the end as well in the group discussion.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up, we have Xenonetix. Hello, Xenonetix.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Can stream hear him perfectly.
Give me a second. There we go. Hello.
Oh, right.
People get to see me.
There, the people can see you now. They can hear
For
and
the
see you.
first time. Good. Glad to hear that people could see me and hear me for the first time. I'm guessing most people, because I used to stream years and years ago, but I'm guessing no one's seen that, so that's fine. Anyway.
Yeah, the community's not very old, so no one's probably seen it. Unless they went back and found you. I think only Riff would do that. He's very...
I think Niv has now
it?
followed me on Twitch, which was very kind of him.
That's a very just it says nothing but just presses follow, and that's it. You get the notification.
Yeah, exactly.
Niverio has followed you.
So yes,
yeah, let's get started.
Right, testing. I think is the discussion at hand. So yeah, basically, I wanted to talk a bit about the fact that. So yeah, tomorrow I'll say. Yeah, I'm already jumping about. Tomorrow is my anniversary of joining the Discord server.
Oh wow.
And the anniversary of posting my first puzzle. Because what I did,
Same day.
right?
Wow.
Yeah, because what I did, because I've been watching CTC for a few months, and then basically decided, okay, well now I got to try. I want to set this puzzle before I joined the server. Like I wanted to set before I actually got into the community, as it were. I don't know why, really. I felt that was the way I should do it, but that's the way I did it. So then I spent about 2 weeks on a puzzle, and I was testing, and like this was before I knew anyone in the community, and know what. Like I wasn't a puzzle setter. I hadn't done any puzzles before at all. So basically, the testing for that was incredibly rigorous. Yeah, and then once I was I say that, I mean, I tried about 3 or 4 different types of puzzles, and like 3 just went nowhere. And then I basically decided, okay, this is the one I want to present. So then I joined the server, and through my first post was actually a post in testing straight away.
Of course.
So I really jumped to the deep end on that one. And,
sometimes when I'm trying someone's puzzle and it's not working out, and not on stream, of course, then I'll like look up what they've said previously, and occasionally it'll be absolutely nothing. They have not spoken except this one puzzle.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. I also I've now gotten into a habit of sort of searching the history of certain people's comments in a way, and what they've published in terms of puzzles and things like that. So basically, yeah, I then posted the puzzle, and then people immediately started testing it, which was excellent. But you were talking about hazing with Niverio. By the way, Xenonetix is the name, just so you know.
Okay, Xenonetix.
No one sees Xenonetix. Just
no one knows what you're talking about, because I cut all of the parts where I was trying to pronounce your name out of the first stream. I cut it all out.
Yep, that's absolutely fair. I completely.
It's like 20 minutes of audio. Xenonetix.
Anyway,
anyways, continue.
Yeah. So Niverio was saying about hazing, and basically, one thing that happened to me with that first puzzle, the first puzzle I did was a magic cage puzzle, which seems to have built some sort of there's a bit of controversy with magic cage puzzles. Some people like them, some people hate them.
Magic square?
Yeah, sorry. Well, magic square, although in this case it was magic cage, because I also did a 4x4 one instead of a 3x3 one within it.
Oh.
So
I've never seen that. Wow. You have more creativity than most people who use that.
Well, this is the other thing, is that for all of my puzzles in general, I try to create something relatively original that I haven't seen before. But anyway, I'm digressing again. But the thing is, Pancake, Pulverizing Pancake, for those of you who do know him, basically he's an expert killer solver. And I didn't really consider my puzzle to be a killer puzzle, but he immediately latched on to the fact that this 4x4 cage was like each row and line added to 20.
Right.
And of course, that then automatically makes it a killer cage of 80, I guess.
I guess so.
So in doing that, he immediately he enjoyed the puzzle, but he immediately circumvented about 50% of all the logic I had in mind for that puzzle. So it was a really weird experience, because clearly people were still enjoying it, but they weren't doing what I had intended at that early stage.
Right.
And that particular puzzle was actually about a 3 out of 5 difficulty. So then after that, I sort of went down to sort of, I went down to 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5, and then I was making loads and loads and loads of easy puzzles for ages.
I mean, the only mistake you made was admitting here that wasn't the intended logic. That's
I'm sorry.
the only
I meant
mistakes.
yes. No, of course. I completely intended for the hidden killer logic to work. um, so yeah, basically, that sort of gave me a lot of feelings, I guess, like positive feelings, because lots of people had been positive, and the community was incredibly welcoming. If you're somehow watching this video and you're not already part of the CCC Discord, highly recommend it.
Yeah,
Definitely
great.
do that. But yeah, so basically, most of my puzzles are nowadays. I'll jump ahead because of the amount of time. I'll jump ahead a few months.
Yeah.
The last time I made, I was just looking at my puzzle history. The last time I made anything that I would consider a traditional puzzle was February. So,
It's a while
so
ago.
the thing is, yeah. So basically, every single puzzle I'm creating, I try to involve some sort of new logic or new constraint in some fashion, and that, of course, requires a lot of testing.
Right.
So, because the other thing about this is I will say, a lot of people seem to think that they can't set puzzles if they haven't solved a lot of a certain constraint, and I would say that is complete nonsense. For anyone interested in setting, who is worried about setting, just go ahead and set it. Jump in the deep
Yeah.
end, even if you've solved none of that constraint. It's so good to actually try and work with constraints, and you really get familiar with constraints just by setting with them. So,
Yeah.
So basically, yeah. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, well, sometimes it does help to have a little bit of guidance in that when you are starting to set something, you just try to set it, but try to set it as if you are trying to solve something that you've never seen before. Don't just try to set a puzzle, because a lot of people will try to set a puzzle by like, I need to think of a break-in before I even sit down. No, just put things in the grid and try. Like, just try.
Absolutely. And that is true, but I have also had it the other way around, where I've been sort of lying in bed, and then suddenly just these ideas sort of throw to me, and I think, oh, right, I'm going to get up and write this down. So
on your first puzzle, that would be very impressive, though.
Yeah, that is true. If you're just starting out setting, I'm guessing you're not starting to dream about puzzles and how to set them. That's what our lives have gotten to. So, yeah, basically, there's this one type of puzzle I've been trying to set recently for weeks now, which I still haven't succeeded at. So a few of my puzzles recently were Fahrenheit's Vision, which was X thermos. I'll just jump into. There's no point in explaining this right now. There's no time to explain what each of these weird constraints are.
We can bring these up if we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Fahrenheit's Vision, it's on LMD. Yeah, that's there somewhere.
Fahrenheit Vision. There we go.
Yeah,
so we can bring the rules up here,
Mm-hmm.
and people can read that while you're talking about them. Oh wait, I can move this chat out of the way. Oh man. I'll put that up here for now.
That's fine.
Okay.
So yeah, basically, it's a chaos construction, because I've been creating a lot of chaos constructions. But the thing was, so basically, a lot of people think I made this after I made my X Thurbos puzzle, which I didn't. I actually made this first. This came as the idea, and then I made an X Thurbos puzzle after that. But anyway, So X Thurbos was the idea, but more importantly in this instance is X regions. So in terms of testing, the X regions thing is very interesting, because it's a very constrained idea. So even if you scroll up just to show the actual grid itself for a moment, I don't think it's a problem for me to mention the break-in, like a slight bit of the break-in for this.
Oh, it's
in
fine.
The top left corner. In the top left corner of this puzzle, I've got 2 arrows pointing at each other. And the only way that can work is if it's a 2. Because if it's a 3, then that means that the one to the right of it would have to be a 4, and that means that there's no way for a 1 or a 2 to fit in that region. That's hard to explain just by visuals without actually showing you, but I think that's the main idea. So basically, you get a 2 immediately, and then you get some regions immediately. So I want to make sure people are rewarded for spotting these sorts of things, and so I always try and make sure that there's something. I think you mentioned this the other day. I can't remember your stream with Tallcat, about sort of rewarding people for deductions wherever possible.
Right.
And so, so in terms of creating this puzzle, I really created it entirely based around that concept, and I needed to test it rigorously. This is the thing. So the testing of it, like I had to test the break-in. Like there's no rest of the puzzle at all. I just had to test the break-in and consider, right, is there any other way to approach this? Is there any other way to think about this? And it's very difficult sometimes to think about that on your own.
Right.
As you said before, I mean, it's always good to have another pair of eyes. And as Niverio said, if there's something that's so fixated in your mind as to how something works, and someone else spots something about it, it's so difficult to get away from that.
Right. Yeah.
Especially if the break-in itself is the actual problem, and then you find someone else finds a way to break in that's completely different and ruins the entire puzzle. But which has happened to me on a couple of occasions. But I'm getting better at it not happening anymore. But the reason I bring that up is because there's this other puzzle I've been trying to make for ages, which is an X-Dutch Whispers puzzle with X regions as well. And the thing is that the logic I've got gives you an entire region with all its digits immediately at the start if you think along the right lines. And then it's a matter of telegraphing it and making sure that people can spot it, because that is very hard as well. Because in terms of testing, if you're focused on a specific type of logic, but then you have no way of, it's difficult to explain. But if you have more, sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, I think the problem you're trying to articulate is, how on earth do you test telegraphing when you're the one who made the thing? Because
exactly,
if you're trying to test, it's like trying not to see this little part of your nose. Like, you can try to look away from it, but it's there. You know it's there. It's on your face. How can you look away from it when it's just in front of your eyes, right?
Yeah. And at some point, so I mean, whenever I test my own puzzles, I always try to sort of get in the mindset of, right, I'm a person who has never seen this puzzle before. And it's very difficult to get into that mindset. But I think I've had a lot of experience over the years in general from what I've done of just trying to put myself in other people's shoes. So it's difficult to do that. I will say the other way to get around that, if you're not so excited to get a puzzle out after completing it that you've completed it, which there are times that those are the case, but literally sleep on it. There are some times you can finish a puzzle, go sleep, maybe give it a couple of days, give it 3 or 4 days, then come back to it in a few days and then try solving it, because then you'll have forgotten some of the logic that you put in, so it's actually more helpful to test and more like you're coming to it completely fresh. That's for me anyway. I don't know what it would be for other people.
So I've said this a million times, that you should wait to test your puzzle just like a couple days or something, or sleep on it. But what I've been trying recently is, if I manage to set a puzzle in the morning, then I try not to think about it all day, don't even think about puzzles at all, and then come back to it in the evening and try to test solve it. Because when you actually sleep, memories and the things that you've done through the day, they solidify in your brain, and you have a better memory of them after you've slept. So if you do it before you sleep, then it's actually a little bit better. And it has worked a little bit. I've forgotten steps like completely by the end of the day that I probably would have remembered if I slept on it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, so as sort of as an example of that, can you go to my Epictia puzzle, which is still my favourite creation to this day? um, so basically, my Prime Sweeper Epictia puzzle. I think I went to, I think about after a month or something, I then came back to it and tried solving it again. And the only part I could actually remember was the break-in. And that was it. So it was perfect because it meant I was coming to this as if I was a completely new person to the puzzle. And yeah, I loved it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the puzzle. I was very proud of the puzzle, very happy with the puzzle. And I loved actually playing through it again as if I'd never come across the puzzle before, which was fantastic. So yeah, this is still probably my favourite puzzle to this day. Is this particular one? It's also one of the hardest ones I've created, but it's just got such great logic in it, which I just really like. So another thing, while I'm here, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
there's this. So at the bottom of this, you can see there are 5 circles,
Yeah.
which I could, yeah, as you can imagine, very limiting. So a thing I've ended up doing a lot in my puzzles recently is sort of limiting it to, like, if there are multiple arrows, for example, I might have 4 arrows along the side of the puzzle, and all 4 of those arrows are the only 4 options. So, like, if there's the only options for those are 2, 3, 4, and 5, then that means that's where you start, and that's where you've then got to figure out, well, are they 2, 3, 4, or 5? And in this particular case, same logic, it has to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's no way it could be 6, and beyond that, it just can't be higher. So, yeah, again, this is a matter of telegraphing. It's just a matter of trying to make sure that's where people focus their mind to. And I quite like the idea of there being sort of hidden quadruples and hidden quintuples right at the very start of the puzzle. So yeah, it's something that I've sort of incorporated. That's sort of, I guess, my style of setting now. I mean, I try and change it up, but you know, it's just that's what ends up being what I go for.
Right.
But for this as an example, I had to try. For anyone who solved it, Niverio solved it. For anyone who solved it, imagine trying to set this in such a way where imagine all of those circles are in every possible configuration around the border of a grid. Because it's got to work in such a way that, like, you've got to consider every possible interaction, every possible way that it can snake effectively. This is a snake
because of a
puzzle.
negative constraint,
Every
right?
possible way. Exactly. So every possible way that the snake could work. And so I went through hours and hours and hours and hours of literally just an empty grid with basically imaginary circles, because there was no point in actually putting real circles in when I first started it. So yeah, basically, and this was before CCC had pen tool and all that sort of thing as well.
Right.
So it was literally just a matter of highlighting and typing in numbers for the specific circles. So yeah, basically I had to put a lot of effort into that, but also that led to my problem of testing, where if I'm testing this puzzle, I've gone through every possible option already.
Yeah.
And someone who's new to it, obviously they're not going to go through every possible option already. They're just going, They just need to think, this is what you've got to do. And so I had to try and telegraph it. I ended up telegraphing it by putting 2 extra circles. As you can see above those 5, I ended up putting 2 extra circles right next to it, which constrained it even more and made it just to say, look here, do something here. Clearly, here is the place to look. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I've got to say on that.
Right. Let's take a jump across the discussion pond to people testing your puzzles, and I'm wondering when you find, because I know your puzzles are very complicated and like lots of interlocking parts and stuff. When you find a step in a puzzle that's like that people don't actually love, like what do you do? How do you begin to change that?
Oh, that's tricky then. It is difficult because it depends how narrow the solve path is for a start.
Right.
Because sometimes there's some flexibility in it, and yeah, basically, if there's no flexibility, then there's not much you can do other than not publish the puzzle, which is a problem. I think that's something I used to do like earlier on in my setting. Like my Sudoku, which is the only puzzle that I've had featured on CTC, that one had the strictest solve path of any of my puzzles. And if there was a problem in it, yeah, it's right at the bottom of the page there. If there was a problem with it, I mean, there was basically nothing I could do. There was just no way to fix it. So, it's basically, I mean, this particular one, it involved weeks of working out the number of dice nets and just trying to figure out every possible configuration and make sure that the logic still works no matter what. So, as you said, you said earlier, like intricate, complicated. That's what I'm now known for, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Probably a bad thing. I don't know.
Have you, because obviously this is one of your earlier puzzles, the Dice Doku. Over time, have you figured out maybe a strategy or a way to make a puzzle that's interlocking and very complex, but that you can sort of have checkpoints? I think Talkat mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
Checkpoints where, yeah.
I think I now have the approach of I have a start, a middle, and an end. So I do I'm very focused on the break-in. I think is the most important part of any puzzle. It's the way you're getting people into the puzzle, and so people are going to either stick around for the puzzle or leave the puzzle based on the break-in. It's like reading the first page of a book. It's the whole thing of this is getting you in there. So I think the break-in is vital. After the break-in, I've now gotten to the stage of keeping the middle a little more vague, sort of trusting that if I've got certain steps that I want to include, I make sure those steps are in there. And if there's a very specific ending I want, sometimes there aren't a specific ending, and I just let the Sudoku do it sometimes. But other times there are very specific endings that I think this is important to have this that makes people think once they've finished it, wow, that was an amazing ending, rather than, oh, there was just a bit of Sudoku to finish this off. And so,
Right.
But so the middle part is now the part where I keep it a little more vague. And that means that I have a little more flexibility. So if you go to my most recent puzzle,
Okay. Yeah.
which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, and people are wondering why on earth I've called it this. The reason I've called it this, by the way, is because this is a very famous Indian dance, which they literally do this. So it's it's the position of that.
Right.
Tried to do. Anyway, so for this very specific, very complicated puzzle, I don't know how many people here will know of Zeta Math's Two Truths and a Lie puzzle, and how incredibly complicated that is. But so, for example, here, I had a little bit of flexibility, and only a little bit of flexibility with the evens, the odds, and the ratio dots. And that was it. So, but the thing was, because I previously had the ratio dot in another place when it went to testing, and then we found that I, annoyingly, had accidentally, K and T pointed this out, and Niverio has decided not to let me forget it, is the fact that I made a marginal logical leap in my testing. And this was after I had been working on this for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. I may have thrown it into testing a bit prematurely, a bit excited about the fact of what I should have done is slept on it and then come back to it. I didn't do that on this occasion. I made that minor mistake. But as a result of that, it meant that there was a specific step that was much, much harder than I planned it to be. So then I had to fix that by moving effectively the ratio dot. And the solution was slightly different for the latter part of the solve, but it didn't. I made sure it didn't lose any of the important logic steps I wanted to include, but I had got that minor flexibility to experiment and tweak it and make sure that it then came with a smoother solve path at the end of it. And now I think it's a better puzzle for it. So I greatly appreciate all the people who tested for that, because it was immensely helpful. I think it was Sashimi, KNT, and Rocky Rower were the three primary testers. And as you mentioned, Niverio mentioned earlier about how like having a video solve of it is even more helpful, and
Yeah.
Rocky Rower did that, and that was just so incredibly helpful to be able to watch someone actually solving the puzzle in real time, because then, yeah, as you say, it's a matter of noticing specific steps, and like at the moment people notice, like I think someone mentioned in one of Zeta's streams months ago, they literally were asking, do setters bother watching people solve? Like, if they have a feature on CCC, they're interested. Do the setters bother watching if they already know the solve path? Of course, the answer is yes. We love watching these things because we love seeing how other people do it. And people will always have slight differences in their approaches to it. I don't
That's
know how
really
you
weird.
feel about that.
That's a weird question.
Oh, yeah, I know. But this is from someone who doesn't set. They're only a solver. They're not a setter at all. So they, in their mind, are thinking, well, they already know how it's done. What's the point in watching it? Like, as if it's a walkthrough. But yeah, it's difficult to explain that. But yeah, that question really stuck with me for some reason, because I just really liked the idea of the fact that if people are, yeah, the notion that people are just watching purely to see them solve it rather than how they solve it. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. It's, yeah, I mean, I certainly watch for the feedback as well, because I love getting the feedback, and I've loved being in this community. And yes, I'm incredibly egotistical. I love the praise. And
And on that note, that's all the time we have. What a great note to end on. Yeah, one more thing. You can say one more thing.
One quick thing. Yeah, one more thing. Yeah, so for the testing, as I say, so I'm now keeping things a little bit vague in myself, so that I can change things if people test. Testing is vital for people. Right. For the people who are testing in the server, if you keep on thinking, if you just think, oh, there's no point in me testing this, forget it. Just test it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Give that feedback. If you do like it, you do like it. Give that feedback. Just, you don't have to give much feedback. If you're worried about giving too much feedback, don't be. Just go ahead, go for it, go to testing, test some puzzles, give some feedback. I think that's the important thing.
I want to say one thing before we move on to Kagisho, or no, sorry, not Kagisho, mathpesto, but if you test a puzzle and you don't finish it, because you don't like it, and you don't want to finish it, please tell them if you don't like it and you didn't finish it. That's super good to know.
Exactly. And don't feel like you're somehow insulting them or anything. Right. We want to hear this. As setters, we want to hear this feedback. We want to know it. It helps us, and it helps us to improve puzzles in the future as well. So I think it's excellent.
Well, thank you for coming on, Xeno. And
so much.
But we'll see you later for the group discussion, I think. Okay.
Hopefully so, if it's not too late. But I hopefully will be here. See you later. Have a good one.
Perfect. Have a good one. All right. right. Oh, I forgot to unshare that, so that was the thing. But we will continue with mathpesto, who is our next guest on here.
Hello.
Hello.
Are you able to
Welcome,
hear?
welcome. I can hear you. I think chat can probably hear you too, because nothing has changed, but we'll see.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
they can hear, I think.
All right, awesome. So I guess I'll get started. I
Yeah.
didn't have a whole lot prepared. Oh, thank you,
Don't worry.
Niverio. I didn't have a whole lot prepared, but I'm also happy to take questions. But I also heard a lot of wisdom from Niverio and Xenonetix, so I also feel like there are some things that I want to add on to what they said.
For sure.
But what I wanted to start with was just talk about kind of my own journey into the community, and in some ways kind of admit a few faults that I had made. For me, I got into puzzling probably 2.5 years ago, early on to the pandemic, which is I think true for a number of other people, and I think also similar to a number of other people. I was on the solving end of things for a good while before actually attempting to delve into setting my own puzzles. So it was probably a year and a half of just watching puzzles, which I think was wise in retrospect, because it really allowed me to adopt a lot of vocabulary, see all the different constraints out there, what different puzzle styles were, all of those things. And then, so once I was ready to, start setting puzzles, I had some tools to work with. But foolishly, I did not really, I didn't join the Discord until relatively recently, and didn't really engage with a lot of the what I've come to learn as a pretty crucial part of the setting process. So I was just looking back, and it wasn't until my 50th puzzle that I ever set that I actually started getting them tested, I'm ashamed to say.
Oh wow. We have a unicorn in here, I guess. That's crazy.
Yeah, and I do have to say, my puzzles improved considerably as a result of putting them up to testing. And the way it started, I remember that I was talking to Tristan once and submitting some puzzles for Zeta's stream, and Tristan had asked if this puzzle or that puzzle had been tested, and I didn't really realize that that's something I was supposed to be doing. And looking back, it seems pretty obvious now. And looking in the chat, I see a lot of expert setters. But I often think about what kind of advice I'd want to give myself when I first started solving puzzles and setting puzzles. What are some things that would be helpful things to know about? And testing is absolutely something that I could not emphasize enough. And it's interesting because I think I have quite a few other hobbies, and this is one of my most recent ones. But I often think, analogously to music, I have a long background in songwriting and composing music, and some other arts that I dabble in, and I would never think twice about not testing something before presenting it, out there, because I think it's even more true with puzzles, because I think, like what Xenonetix and Niverio were saying too, you have this ability to know what's going on in your puzzle, and that really obfuscates what's actually telegraphed, because
Right.
everything is obvious to me in my own puzzle, and I can't just force myself to move through it acting as if I don't know that. So yeah, once I started testing, I immediately got just such helpful feedback, and sometimes it was about the actual solve path, sometimes it was about the clarity of the rules, sometimes it was about the actual just aesthetics of the puzzle, and things like, oh, if you move to this run Renban, twisted a different way, it'll look a lot nicer. And just little things that I feel really improved my puzzles.
Yeah.
And I think it also just was an easy way to embed myself into the community further and also engage in a reciprocity around testing. So I feel like, I'm now at a point where people reach out to me and I could reach out to individual people, in addition to putting it out there on the Discord app. But just knowing, oh, I know so and so is really skilled with this particular rule set, and I think they would have a lot of great feedback. And building up those relationships has been really valuable. And I just noticed a few other things that I want to respond to that I heard earlier, and also kind of talk about things on the other end as a tester. Yeah, I think Niverio mentioned, you should definitely be the first solver of your own puzzle. I absolutely agree with that. I think, simply testing it for uniqueness is not sufficient before putting it out there in the world.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's difficult for me, and again, analogous to music, I can write something and point to certain ideas that I feel like, this seems like a good concept. I think it's well executed, but how do I actually know until I put it to other people? I see someone in the chat was talking about imposter syndrome, and I've definitely been guilty of that at times. So I feel like once I put something up for testing, that's the first time that I really feel like I have an authentic sense of, is this actually going to be a good puzzle or not? I feel like if I'm the only one looking at it, it's not enough. And I think the same can be said about difficulty too. I think I've been generally okay in estimating the difficulty of my own puzzles, but I've definitely been off a few times.
Right.
And so obviously that's a big help. And then I loved what you were saying, and also Kodak mentioned it in the chat earlier, but almost forcing yourself to forget your puzzle for a bit.
Yeah.
And that's something else that I've learned through testing, is it really forces you to slow down. I think when I first started setting puzzles, there was just such this euphoric feeling of, I've put something out there and it actually works. I can't wait to just have everyone try it. But having to put it through testing now really slows that down and allows me to get past that initial feeling, and knowing that it's going to get more eyes on it before it's out there in the world, it's only going to improve from it.
Yeah.
I certainly have never had a puzzle get worse after testing. At the very least, I might have disregarded someone's feedback, but honestly, I would say probably 99% of the time, the feedback I've gotten, I've been able to incorporate and has made the puzzle better. I think, fortunately for me, I have a really terrible memory, so I love
Same.
being able to sit down the next day and have no idea how I, approached the puzzle. It's also forced me to write up thorough solution guides, so that I don't forget down the line how to do my own puzzles. But that just kind of working against that that instinct and excitement over a puzzle, and forcing yourself to practice patience, I think has been really helpful. And yeah, Kodak mentioned something that I also do, which is rotating your puzzle in some way. And it's pretty fascinating how, even if you have really internalized your solve path, simply rotating it really throws you for a loop, and suddenly it's a little awkward. You're looking at it from a literally a different perspective.
I mean, like there's lots of weird things like that with the human brain. Like if you're studying for a test and you memorize the section headings of your textbook, you're more likely to do better on the test. That's scientifically like a case study. If you're in the same room that you learned the information in while you're writing a test, you'll be more likely to do well on the test. It's these weird things, and if we rotate a puzzle, suddenly our brain feels weirdly uncomfortable with the situation, and when there's like an eerie familiarity to the uncomfortableness, it's almost worse. So
Right.
I think that is something I should do more often is rotate the puzzle because it might
Yeah.
trick your brain in that same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about being a tester as well. And I feel like I've gotten so much out of that, again, in terms of being more involved in a community, obviously, but also just being a better setter and solver. Um, and I think, giving and receiving feedback are themselves skills that does take a lot of practice. And I think, something that Niverio was saying is something I try to do a lot as well, is when testing, I really try to highlight something very specific about the puzzle, what my favorite part of it was, my favorite
Right.
step, you know, um, because I think that really allows people to identify what are the strengths of their own puzzle, and what was, for example, telegraphed well, or what wasn't. Um, and I think also for those who want to revise the puzzle a few more times, seeing what are people really liking out at the puzzle, that can this logic be replicated in some other cases or something of that sort. But yeah, and I think also just being a tester, has allowed me to fine tune thinking about, I don't think people have talked so much about this, but clarity of rules,
Yeah,
and particularly working with new rule sets that haven't existed before. Both as a setter and a tester, I think it's really helpful to make sure that that's 100% clear to folks. Um, and it's one of those things that I have my own biases and whatever. So of course, what I write is going to make sense to myself, but I have to be mindful of what potential blind spots there are, how vague interpretations can be. I'm someone who tries to work with new rule sets and either combine ones in new ways or whatever. And I think for those, it's really essential, and part of the testing process that should be there as well. Um,
yeah.
and
I
I
mean,
think
my, a confession of mine is that I often don't know how to write down the rules to a new rule set, even if it's something simple.
right.
I don't know how the best way to convey it is, so I'll just like write something that is just enough for the tester to understand what I mean, and then say, "Please help me word these rules." And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And then if they don't, then I have to sit down and actually write it down. But you can always ask in like voice chat one, and lots of people are just waiting to chomp at the bite to tell you that your wording sucks. Like
Yeah.
don't feel like no one's gonna respond. People will respond to
Yeah.
that.
I've absolutely been there. And I think, when I was mentioning earlier just about thinking about advice I would have want to have given myself, as you're alluding to, yeah, consult Henry Pye James. Absolutely. My rules have always benefited from consulting Henry Pye James on the
Yes,
clarity of the wording.
his specialty.
But
Yes.
just in terms of what advice I would want to give myself, starting out at setting, and yeah, don't be afraid to put your puzzles out there for testing. I think I was timid at first, and I think also believed that no one would be willing to, that you have to be a well-known setter for anyone to be willing to jump at it. But really, there are people who are just there on Discord at any given moment, ready to try something new out. But yeah.
I think the worst uh, thing you can possibly do is to put your puzzle up on LMD before it's been tested and then put it in the testing server and link to the LMD page. I've seen that far too often. Like, it's very confusing to me why people do that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I was thinking about it earlier that putting it up in testing, it's like an idea you have for a tattoo. but then once it's on LMD, it's the actual tattoo.
Right.
And
That's a good way to think about it.
I want to get all the feedback on a tattoo before it's actually been, inked onto my skin. I don't want to hear people's criticisms of it once it's on there. So yeah.
And I think you noticed, or you not noticed, I think you mentioned that you have some more private test solvers that you send some puzzles to because you think they're a little bit better at this constraint. They'll get good feedback. Do you find it more helpful to do private testing than public testing?
I think it depends on the type of puzzle. I think for newer rule sets, and if I think particularly if no one's really going at it in testing because it's a new rule set and maybe it's a 4 or 5 out of 5 difficulty, then I'll start reaching out to people. But it's usually not what I'll do first. First, I'll put it up in testing, and I'll also say I think previous speakers were mentioning this as well. But in terms of receiving feedback, like I said, most of the time I do incorporate it. But if it's someone I don't know, for example, and haven't solved any of their puzzles before, they haven't solved any of my puzzles before, there's no history there. Usually, what I'll do is, I may relay those criticisms to someone who has tested my puzzles in the past, and see if they agree with what that person said. And usually I'll try to defer to some of those other people who I trust, and again, most of the time they do tend to agree with some of that feedback, and so I am able to incorporate it.
Right. Orlando had asked this question, I think, during your segment, so I'll read it. It was about imposter syndrome. Do you think imposter syndrome on behalf of testers is one reason why some people are hesitant to say why they didn't or what they didn't enjoy about a solve?
Yeah, I think I know I've been guilty of giving setters the benefit of the doubt, and when I'm testing a puzzle and there's something that I am just not catching, my go-to assumption is, oh, that just went over my head, but surely they had something in mind. And sometimes that may be the case, but sometimes it's not. And I think that again speaks to the importance of testing, because I think, like I mentioned, I had so many puzzles that I never tested when I was setting early on. And I think testing allows for this kind of accountability where I actually have to justify the solve path. If there's something that feels really convoluted or borders on bifurcation or something, I actually have to speak to someone about that, and having that back and forth is really valuable. But yeah.
So in terms of changing from setting without public testing, just your self-testing, to changing to having that, what do you think is the main part of your puzzles that has improved?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very broadly speaking, I would say the smoothness of a puzzle. I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but honestly, for me, that's what I like to hear when someone is solving one of my puzzles, is to hear that the path is smooth.
Yeah.
I like to have lots of little deductions throughout. I try not to have super long chains or anything that again borders on bifurcation. So to hear that it is a smooth path is really important to me, and I think that has definitely been a big change now that I've gone through testing again, because I feel like I have to justify each step to the testers, and they can be very honest with me. And I think also just a certain consistency around the difficulty of a puzzle. So for example, I know I did one recently that I published that was, I forget, it was either a 2 or 3 out of 5 difficulty, called The Steps. And it involved, a break-in involving swordfishes, and there were some cages and Renbon and entropic lines. but there was this one step that really stood out to testers, and I noticed like multiple people kept getting stuck at this one point, and it involved maybe Y wings or something, but it was logic that felt really out of place for that difficulty of a puzzle.
Right.
And thanks to putting that through testing and seeing where people were getting stuck, I went back and smoothed that out because I felt like it was just incongruous with the rest of the puzzle. It didn't feel like it felt like 4 out of 5 difficulty logic in an otherwise 2 or 3 out of 5 difficulty. And so yeah, testing I would say also has really helped in terms of that kind of consistency.
Right. Oh yeah, I had a question I wanted to ask, so I'll ask that one. Should we be testing to ensure a path is logically sound or to see if our path is the only path? And this sort of goes back to Niverio saying we should be trying to make sure that like the intended logic is there when you're testing sort of by yourself. Are you looking to see if it's just the intended logic or if there's other logic? What's your approach?
Yeah, so I think it depends to some extent on the type of puzzle.
Yeah.
I definitely have ones that are. I, I think there's something inherent to the difficulty of a puzzle that relates to how many potential break-ins there are and things of that sort. So I feel like it's perhaps harder to have an easier puzzle with one and only one clear solve path. There might be a few ways in, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either. But I do think it's the responsibility of the setter to be aware of what those paths are,
Right.
and it's been helpful to know that. I also noticed that, like RiffClown, for example, is talking about collaborative solving, and I am currently actually doing my first ever collaborative construction with Nordy. I have never been able to collaboratively set before, and it's an incredible process. I'm really enjoying it. I'm excited for when our puzzle comes out. But I think that's great because it feels like just a constant back and forth of testing each other's ideas, and holding each other to high standards. And really, I think everything I've said before about the testing process and all the benefits of it, it's just all that much more existent when working with someone else.
Definitely.
And in terms of collaborative solving as well, just noticing all the different ways that people can tackle a puzzle. For example, I know for myself, it doesn't matter how many times I read on Y wings, I will never spot them in a
Yeah,
in
same.
a puzzle. They are just not the way my brain works. So it's always fascinating to see that, whether it's in the testing process or on someone's stream, seeing how other people in the chat are noticing things in a puzzle. But yeah.
Yeah, it's great conversation. We have a couple minutes here. How do we provide feedback that's like honest but won't upset anyone if it's bad?
Yeah. Like I said before, I think that's a skill in and of itself. And, from my personal experience in Discord, some people have a real knack for that, and others are, at least for me, a little more blunt than I would like at times. Sometimes I feel like this puzzle is my baby. How dare you? But, it's my own approach is a compliment sandwich.
Right.
I've never tested a puzzle where I haven't found something that I liked about it, and I always like to start off with that. I would be hard pressed to not find something redeeming about a puzzle, and highlight that again, like I said before, because if it's going to go through some more iterations, thinking about how the setter can incorporate more of those things that are really enjoyable. But I I also think that I try to make it clear when I'm giving feedback that this is, my opinion, my taste. Um, I think it can be kind of hard for people to hear it as when it's presented as some kind of objective truth.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there are some things that people generally agree upon. I don't think anyone has really made a good case for a puzzle full of bifurcation being particularly enjoyable. So there are some extremes like that, but I try to make it clear like this, maybe this is not my thing, and I feel like everyone has at least one of those. I know there's been a lot of anti-knight sentiment in the Discord recently. So it could be a matter of a rule set, or just like I mentioned before, like I'm never going to spot a Y-wing if that's something that is inherent to your puzzle. It's probably not going to be something I would particularly enjoy, but maybe that's something for other people. But
Yeah, I always try to approach it in the way that this is my opinion. Like, you can disagree with it, but this is why I think this
Yeah.
is well. Like, and often
Yeah.
why I think that is based on like what other people have enjoyed in the past. Like, if there is a Y-wing, I would say like most people will not enjoy this. Like, based on my opinion, based on my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, another aspect of that is, for those of us who are testers who are also setters, I think it's, great to then, provide some alternate suggestions. And, I feel like I've been able to do that quite a number of times. And, sometimes it's a really, really simple thing. Like, just move this dot over, extend this line, um, and things of that sort. And again, on the receiving end, I think people have been really generous to me as well in terms of when they did spot that step that they didn't like, was able to provide a very concrete suggestion of what I could do to the grid to overcome that obstacle.
Right. My suggestion is just always give a given. Just add a given. If I don't like a step, just add something. To get rid of it.
I think that might be its own setting discussion that you could have sometime, but I would love to talk about the unfair stigma against given digits, which again have been guilty of in the past as well.
Everyone has.
But yeah. Yeah, I would love for us as a community to move past that, because I think given digits can make a puzzle really good. And I've gone back to some of my old puzzles and realized, oh, if I wasn't so stubborn, actually put a given digit into here, it was a much better puzzle. But
Yeah,
that's a topic for another day, perhaps.
yeah, and with that we're out of time. It's the time. I keep trying to say the time, and it's not the time for everyone else. So,
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great to talk to you, and great to hear this perspective of. I don't think I've ever heard a perspective from someone who had no testing before and then had testing. So, very valuable perspective here. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right. Oh, and I don't think mathpesto can make it back for the final group discussion, but hopefully we will have a good time anyway. All right, next up we have the Kagisho. So we'll give him a little ring. You just waved goodbye? You waved goodbye to mathpesto when you're watching a stream? Oh my word, that's pretty silly. We have spinning squares that will. Oh, there we go.
All right. Yeah, I did. I waved goodbye at mathpesto for no reason.
think you're a little bit quiet, so I'm going to turn you up a little bit.
I think last time it was a bit quiet too. Yeah, for me.
Like in the playback?
No, I just remember last time when I joined, people were saying I was quiet and you had to turn me up. It was just the same
okay.
thing.
All right. Well, let's get started. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I just got done helping my mom do some work.
Okay.
Not job work, but labor.
Labor. Okay. uh,
So, admittedly, I have to confess I have missed most of the stream. I only was able to tune in for mathpestos. So,
no worries. No worries. We were mostly just talking about that Kagisha guy and how annoying it is that he doesn't test his puzzles.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
But anyways, I think you had a puzzle in mind that you wanted to focus on. Is that right?
I
For the start?
did, but I've changed my mind.
You changed your
I
mind?
no longer
Okay.
do.
You
Yeah.
don't care anymore? Okay.
Well, yeah, I just think it would make sense for you to, in particular, because I got back later than I expected. I wasn't able to watch the stream. I don't want to.
Right, you have a
rehash
fresh take on all this stuff. You haven't heard what other people have said, so you're not influenced
I just don't
by
want to rehash things people have already talked about.
yeah, you're not influenced by Niverio's propaganda or anything like that. Okay, so I'll ask a question to start off the discussion. When you're giving feedback on a puzzle that you have tested, how do you separate your personal opinions on the puzzle from constructive feedback? And we touched a little bit on that with mathpesto, but I'm curious.
For me, I'm honestly not sure I do. I don't know if I do distinguish those. I mean, I think I try to. I like if I say, let's say I test a variant that I know like arrows. I'm not very good at arrows. Okay,
Right.
I'll just say it. If I test an arrow puzzle and I'm like, wow, that was really hard, I might tell them it was really hard for me, but then I might also add that I kind of suck at arrows. I don't know.
Right.
I might give some context, but like I'm also just gonna, my experience is really all I can share when I'm testing. At least that's how I feel about it.
Right, like you feel like your experience is what other solvers will probably experience.
Yeah, I mean, I might say, like, say if someone posts a 2 out of 5 arrow puzzle or something, they say it's 2 out of 5, and I'm like, that took me 40 minutes. I might say
It's not.
someone seeing this puzzle who wasn't very familiar with arrows, who was like, oh look, a 2 out of 5 arrow puzzle, might not enjoy arrows after solving that puzzle.
Right.
Because it might feel daunting,
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to tell people. Absolutely. Now, I have a very good insight into how you test your puzzles because I feel like me and you are very much involved with the testing process with each other because we're usually sending puzzles back and forth. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been sending puzzles back and forth much less recently because I've been busy. But we're usually sending puzzles back and forth and testing each other's puzzles and providing private feedback.
Yeah, no,
before.
for sure. You are definitely one of the people I reach out to the most about testing, really, and I think it goes both ways.
So, how do you feel like are private tests more valuable than public tests, or is there a difference in value?
There's a difference, for sure. There's a difference. The private tests are good, right? You can get people that you know like what they're good at, what their strengths are as solvers, and whose opinion you respect, or you know what you're getting into. But
Right.
that also means that I don't know, it can be hard to, let's say, because puzzles are so much about context in terms of, like, difficult puzzles, and are so much about context in terms of, like, who the setter is. Like, if I send you a puzzle and I'm like, hey, I think this is really cool, you should try it out, you're you might reach a hard step, and you might conclude that you are missing something, or you know you might spend some time thinking about it, whereas maybe someone who doesn't know me as well might think, like, I mean, so they might question whether or not they're meant to do something that they consider distasteful, I guess, if that makes sense. Like,
Right.
they may not understand the style of puzzles that I said, that I really, really do not like bifurcating. And so if something feels like bifurcating to me, I'm not going to enjoy it. But, like, there are things that may not feel like bifurcating to me that
Yeah.
I suspect you would typically pick up on, typically. But like a public test, it might be insightful in the sense that gives some information about what someone who has no idea who I am might test my puzzle and be like, yeah, that was really hard. I had a really hard time with this step, and that might be helpful to know.
Definitely. There's definitely that aspect of it where even if you're trying not to use a setter meta, like Niverio said earlier, when you're testing, you instinctively understand what types of deductions the other person uses usually.
Yeah, no, for sure. I also think it's also nice. I mean, public testing is always nice if people give you amazing feedback. But I also think that definitely giving public testing. I mean, like, I think that giving public testing, you're less likely to get negative feedback, and I think negative feedback is really important. Um,
I wish people would shit on me more.
yeah, no, I think that if a puzzle is crap, I would love to hear that it's crap, rather than be told it's amazing and then publish it.
Well, there was that example of, I don't know if you remember that puzzle that I published that I had a weird situation with the testers where people were getting into trouble, and for some reason, they didn't come to me. One of the other testers approached them and helped them. And then everyone thought it was an easy puzzle because I think it was Diagonal Bicycle. I think it was that one.
Oh, okay.
And I was telling you about this, and you thought it was a 5 out of 5 puzzle or something like that, and they were saying that it was like low 4. Like 4 testers said it was low 4, and I was very confused. And it turns out to be 5 out of 5 on LMD, and the steps are not very well telegraphed, in my opinion. I just got really confused with testing reports back. But sometimes things go weird when you're doing public testing, and people are afraid to ask the setter for help and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think it's if you're asking someone other than the setter for help on one of their own puzzles, then you're not that asking the setter for help is also feedback, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing to recognize as testers as well, not just setters.
Polando says, evil question for both me and you. What do you wish the other would do more when providing feedback on your puzzles?
I wish Mem would tell me I suck and to quit setting puzzles more often.
I do that every time.
I don't know. When I'm getting feedback from Mem, I don't know. I mean, you're pretty honest with me. Like, if you think I can do better, you'll let me know. So I mean, I appreciate that. I don't know. I think you're a pretty reliable tester, or I wouldn't have you test as much as I do.
I always feel like a puzzle should be the best that it can be. So if the person is willing to make it the best that they can be, and I know that you are, then I'm willing to push you harder to make it the best that it can be. Like if I kind of don't like something, but I don't really have a good reason for it, I'll still tell you.
Yeah. 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 No, I mean, I think testing is just about being honest. It's like, even if you absolutely thought something was terrible, I mean, that's very hard for most people to tell someone. It's hard to tell someone like, man, that sucked. Like, this was terrible. But, just trying to,
Monstrously bullshit.
it's important for them to know if you thought it was terrible, but, maybe just say it like,
Yeah.
this was, say I didn't love this, but, it was like, there were, also I think it's, nice to just say the things you did appreciate. So then maybe they
Oh,
can
yeah.
rework the
Yeah.
parts you didn't like.
Oh, I guess I should answer this too, because he said both of us. I don't know. I think I feel like I haven't gotten you test a puzzle in forever, but I feel like I would love to know more, like the hardest step of a puzzle, uh, just so I can understand like where the solve path is going and what is the hardest place to get through. But I get that sometimes that never even comes up in your mind. Like if you're looking for the hardest step and there is no like hardest step, it's just sort of all the same. It often happens that way.
Yeah, it's hard to catalog, every step you've taken. Yeah, Zeta said it nicely. This part was a bit technical for me.
Yeah.
It'd be a nice way to say it. I have various ways of saying I didn't like a puzzle. I'm not going to say them here because then people will know that I didn't like their puzzle. But um, I, if I dislike them, I guess there's a difference between didn't liking, like not liking, and disliking, and my feedback will differ depending.
Yeah. I think I've had a couple people ask me when I'm trying to give them feedback that is trying to hint at that I didn't like their puzzle, but I'm too afraid to like tell them exactly why. I think one of the things people ask me is, what would you rate this puzzle in LMD? Which is a really weird question. I've had that more
beauty?
than 3 times.
Like for beauty or for difficulty?
For beauty.
Yeah, that's an awkward question.
It's a very awkward question, uh, especially with an anonymous situation, which is LMD. And I usually just say, well, I like you as a person, and I feel like you put a lot of work into this, and I did like a lot of the puzzle, but that doesn't mean that during this phase of testing that I'm going to tell you that everything's okay, because it's not. I feel like this puzzle could be a very nice puzzle, but
Yeah, that sounds like the kind of question I would just almost ignore and be like, well, I would rate it, I would rate it
what it
very
deserves.
beautiful. You made a few changes or something. Like just completely diverted. I don't know. I mean, I've never had someone ask me that, so thankfully.
I guess I've just been unlucky. People, at least 3 people have asked me that.
Thank you, Ron Planer. I've not been asked that. I'm not a particularly prolific tester. I'll hop in well, that's partially because I half the puzzles I test, I start and then I don't like them and I stop.
So
But
no one wants you to test their puzzle.
I yeah, I don't know. I don't test as much as I probably should. I try to, but I'm guessing that the reason you've been asked that and I haven't is because you maybe have tested more than I have. It's hard for me to make time to test because I'm not a. There are certain variants that I'm very fast at solving, but like there are some variants that I'm not fast at solving just at all.
Right.
Although I've gotten a lot faster since I started setting. So I think I'm getting better.
Do people ask you very often to test solve their puzzle? Maybe trading solves, for example?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah. Sometimes it's I don't know. It's kind of it's like a give and take kind of thing. I mean, like Leroy, however you want to say it. He
Yeah.
solved Starity. He rated that puzzle, and he didn't ask me to solve any of his puzzles, but I just went on and I saw he had posted a puzzle on LMD, and I was like, okay, I'll just return the favor because that was nice of him. And so I solved one of his puzzles on LMD, and he appreciated it. I don't know. I think that like a certain level of reciprocation is appreciated by most of the community.
Do you think that trading test solves impacts the honesty of your feedback, especially if they haven't solved your puzzle yet?
I mean, for sure, I'm sure it affects the substance of the feedback itself. I'm quite certain it does. But it's also, I don't do that quite as much as I used to. Like trading solves. I will sometimes, like if I solve the puzzle by Niverio to get him to solve my double or Renbon. That wasn't necessarily explicitly to get him to solve my double or Renbon, but I just knew that solving a puzzle of his, he would appreciate it and he might solve my double or Renbon. But it's not necessarily because I don't even know where I was going. You asked me because
You didn't make an agreement to do it.
Yeah. You asked me if it affects the
Honesty of the feedback, or the substance,
honesty
maybe.
of the feedback. The substance. I would say it's pretty tough to have someone solve a puzzle of yours and say they love it, and then you solve a puzzle of theirs and say that wasn't very good. Like that's really hard. That's even harder than just
Yeah, I think so. It's certainly more awkward.
Yeah. But I think that there's ways of navigating that, right? Like, I mean, I think you can get that across without being rude. In particular, I think it's always nice to say the things that you did like. Mathpesto mentioned that. I think it's important to say the things you did like about the puzzle, but then say that there may be some things that that maybe weren't for you, or maybe it was too technical, like as Xenonetix said.
Now, when you're solving your own puzzle, I know that Niverio says that he tries to look for like other paths through the puzzle. Now, I've just thought of this. I wonder, do you or has anyone else you've seen test solving puzzles, do they try to look for different paths in your puzzle other than the one that exists and they see?
No. I mean, certainly testers, because I'm never going to tell them the intended path. I mean, I think that would require me to tell them like, hey, don't do this or something,
That would be weird.
which I've never done. I personally don't spend all that much time looking for alternative paths.
I
I don't
don't
know.
either,
For me, setting
because it
puzzles is
doesn't
kind of
really
like
matter to me.
for me, setting puzzles is kind of like writing, and I don't write like most people write. When I'm writing, like say if I'm writing like an essay or at work it'd be a memo. If I was writing a memo, I'm going to write it where when I have finished writing a sentence, I'm confident that the sentence says what I wanted to say. Like
Right.
it's a well-written sentence. It's done. I'm not going to go back and redo it. I don't. So it's kind of like once I'm done writing, I'm just done. I'm done with the product, and I kind of approach setting in that way as well. I try to think very thoroughly about it as I go along. Occasionally, I will find things that kind of subvert what I wanted, but not necessarily because I'm looking for them. And I don't necessarily I don't necessarily always think that's a bad thing either.
Right. I don't often do that when I am test solving someone's puzzle, but sometimes I will, especially if it is a newer solver or newer setter, and it's and if the puzzle is not going the way that they intended, and they are very vocal about that, I will try to look for other paths, or if I don't like the deductions, I will try to look for other deductions that exist. But I'm wondering, do you get upset when someone is solving your puzzle like the wrong way? And I mean that in the worst way, like the wrong way. Like if someone is literally trying to like case check your puzzle, are you upset that someone is test solving
I
your
don't
puzzle
get
in this way?
upset. I don't get upset. I mostly feel bad. It makes me
Right.
feel bad. I don't get like angry.
Oh yeah.
I suppose maybe feeling bad, you could say that that's a way. Upset's kind of a vague term for a
Yeah.
few a range of emotions. So I guess in that sense, I can get upset, but I mostly feel like, well, because it kind of feels like a waste of time, right? I
Right.
if they're case checking if they're case checking my puzzle, I'm probably not going to listen to their feedback as much.
Right.
But they're also taking the time to test it. So then it's just like, well, no one's really benefiting from this process anymore.
Right. And the weird thing is that sometimes you're not watching them solve, so you don't know what they did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if, out of sight, out of mind, I guess. I mean, if they bifurcate my puzzle and don't say anything about it, then, I mean, I'm none the wiser. But if they told me that they were test casing the whole puzzle because they couldn't see anything, then that might be that
Depends who it is, right?
definitely depending on the person. If it was someone I knew, I would certainly think that would be a call for some changes to the puzzle. But
Yeah. I don't think I've ever had anyone say they've used uniqueness when solving Rift Clown. I think people generally.
I have told someone that I used uniqueness to solve one of their puzzles, but I literally couldn't see anything. So I don't know. I mean, it would have gone untested otherwise for me. But
Interesting.
that was not one of my proudest moments as a tester.
I've tested someone's puzzle where they said to use uniqueness, but it wasn't like the puzzle was not unique. They just said to use uniqueness to make it unique. Like they had a deadly pattern and they just wanted you to resolve it for them. And I had a long argument with this person on what that meant, uniqueness deduction. I still don't really understand why they thought that it was to make the puzzle unique, you add uniqueness deductions.
I could see that being a source of confusion for someone who was new to the community.
I guess.
I mean, if it's like, well, uniqueness deduction, what's that? It's like, oh, it's when it wouldn't be unique if this wasn't true, and then you're like, oh, okay, well then, I'll just use that, just make it unique, or so. I mean, like I can see that being like kind of strange.
Yeah, it is a bit strange. It was strange. I don't even remember who it was, honestly. When you find a step in a puzzle that's not good, it must be changed or should be changed. How do you like start the process of doing that? Do you just restart the puzzle, or do you use some kind of checkpoint system, or what?
That depends on the puzzle for sure. I think that being really picky about puzzles, about setting your own puzzles, is really important. I don't think you should settle for something that's really ugly just because you love everything else. So I definitely think that one of those you need to do something, right? Like if I got something in my throat. I think that some types of puzzles kind of you really can't make small changes, just to be totally honest. Like you just can't do it without like fundamental. Like Shikaku, it's like if you're saying a Shikaku, you can't just like, oh, move the circle. Like that might break the puzzle. So So I think it really just depends on the type of puzzle. I would definitely, in like puzzles that don't just break when you make small changes like that, I would tend to try to go back. Like I said, I approach it kind of like writing, where I, kind of keep redoing something over and over again until I am done. I keep. So in that sense, I would prefer not to just start from scratch. But when I was sitting like whack, I restarted that puzzle many times
Yeah.
because that was just brutal.
But to be honest, you got completely lucky with that absurd deduction in that puzzle. It was just that made me physically sick when I saw that deduction.
I mean, it's cool though. It
It's
wasn't
very
bad.
cool. No, it wasn't bad. It was just it's a weirdness. Like
Yeah, it kind of when I found it, I was just like, okay, wow. And then I finally had something. I mean, I had something to go off of, because I think I set like 50 or 60 versions of that puzzle before I found something to even work with. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
right. I don't think I've asked this question before, but people have sort of answered it in a roundabout way, and we have like 2 minutes left. So, how can we make testing submissions better for testers?
Hmm.
As
To be honest,
solvers, as setters?
I think the current system is fairly decent. I mean, I don't have any negative experiences with the testing channel. I would say that it's nice. I mean, I don't, certainly not on the Discord side. I can't think of any like
I mean, one thing that's
major
been
change.
suggested is to put an estimated difficulty with your puzzle.
I would say that's what I was going to say. I think that for the users, there are certain changes that might improve the testing process, and that would be one of them, including estimated difficulty, the kinds of feedback you're looking for. It's like, are you wanting feedback on the difficulty? It's like, if like if the puzzle is supposed to be crazy hard, then maybe you're just like, maybe it's just like, yeah, I know it's really hard. I don't need to be told that, for example.
Right. Um, I mean, I think I said this with Nordy, wherein he said about the putting something in the intro thing, but putting something in the intro of your puzzle, people forget things as soon as they read them. If you put something like, I want feedback on the difficulty of the puzzle in your testing feedback submission, or sorry, testing submissions post, 90% of people are going to forget that you even said that by the time they solve the puzzle.
That's true. That's true. I feel like it is kind of hitting. It's kind of like talking to a wall. Sometimes I say like, oh, I want feedback on on this. Like there's it's some aspect of the puzzle, and I just get like, oh, I love that puzzle. That's it, or something. Who knows? So I do. I can relate to that. Megalam actually brings up a really good point. Yeah, definitely don't tick broken puzzle. I had someone tick a puzzle as solved once when it wasn't unique. That's happened. So, definitely just be honest in testing. You don't just give feedback because you think you missed something at the end of the puzzle. It's like, maybe it's not unique. I mean, maybe the setter messed up. That is possible. We're not gods.
Yeah. And we don't mean don't press broken puzzle ever, but don't press broken puzzle without talking.
Don't press broken puzzle if it's not broken.
And talk to the setter if you think it's broken. Please talk to the setter, because it's probably not broken if you're pressing broken puzzle. It is probably not broken. there's a chance that it is, but it's probably actually not. Anyways, that's all the time we have. But it's okay
All right.
because we're doing the group discussion now, so you'll just join us in the group discussion, I think.
Okay.
Uh,
All
but
right.
you do have to leave because this is not a group discussion.
All right. I will
Cool.
leave. Goodbye, chat.
Goodbye. See you in a second. All right. The group discussion may take a second to set up because it is, especially with the chat and everything. It's quite a lot of.
I should keep my camera off since it's going to cause like latency issues like last time.
No, it shouldn't cause latency issues this time.
Oh, okay.
Because I have done what they have asked me to do and turned off hardware acceleration, which is supposed to solve
Chat
everything.
can just put their hands up over my face so they don't have to look at it.
Right. That's also a solution.
I can't even talk now. I'm currently trying to figure out how to turn my camera back on.
And I'm assuming Niverio is going to join us. But I'm not sure.
Is anyone else?
Mathpesto has a meeting, so he cannot make it. Oh, you won't be joining. Okay. Well, we have 3 out of 5, so that's okay.
All right.
Are you going no camera, Xeno, or camera?
I'm trying to figure it out.
Okay.
For some reason, it's not working as well in the group chat as it did earlier. But give me a moment.
No worries. Take your time. And once you turn your camera on, like that Discord's just gonna
There we go. Got it. Got there eventually. So yeah, I mean, in regards to the broken puzzle thing that I was mentioning, I mean, the reason it bugged me in this particular instance was that it was a puzzle that had 3 successful test solves.
Oh, that's
And then
absolutely
someone,
worse.
yeah, and then someone after three people had already solved it successfully, then someone clearly they'd set it to attempted, and then they set it to broken, and then no one would touch that puzzle ever again. Like no one would try solving it because it's just this is broken at that point. They don't care that people have successfully solved it. It's just
You know, there's
I
an
think
even
there's one
worse
time
situation
a
than
puzzle
that
that I-
is. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just do quickly. When someone says on LMD, this puzzle is broken, when there's like 15 solves on it.
yeah.
No, I don't
That
think
is a
it
big problem.
I
There,
don't think it
there
is.
was one time I saw a puzzle posted on testing that was marked as broken, like right after I started it, and I like messaged the setter. I was like, I see this puzzle is marked as broken. Is it actually broken, or did they like say anything to you? And then he said, no, they hadn't said anything to him. He hadn't heard anything, and then I'm pretty sure I ended up solving it. So that's also a thing.
Yeah, I think that broken puzzle should only be an option for the setter themselves to set. I don't think.
Yeah, if
Other
only
people
Discord
should be
was a
able to.
little bit more designed for Sudoku community.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's up with that? No representation really. So
someone was asking about the thing on LMD. Yeah, I think you mentioned it earlier, didn't you, Meme? You prefer mem or meme, by the way?
I don't care. Meme Rister is a joke based on memristor, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
what my
memristor is
research is
what-
based on. So I respond to both.
That makes sense. But yeah, someone was mentioning, Rockrat Zero mentioned about the scene where they drop a puzzle into testing that they've already posted on LMD. And I think you were mentioning that earlier about why that doesn't make sense. And I completely agree. It's weird to me that people decide. Like, I think it's okay if they're so confident that they can put it on LMD that they want to post it. That makes sense. But then to put it in testing as well,
Yeah, I mean,
it's
to me,
very
it feels
strange to me.
honestly, to me, it feels a bit disrespectful. I mean, to me, just because
Mm.
it's like, well, you're obviously not. It's published. Like, it doesn't matter what I say. You know, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not interested in my feedback. So,
Honestly,
but
if
if
I
you
see
are, then
that,
it shouldn't have
if
been
I
posted
see
to
that
LMD.
again, I am marking the puzzle broken. just for the sake of it, and then say, well, the puzzle wasn't tested before it was published, so it's a broken puzzle in that regard. Like, just to get their attention, I guess.
A little bit of a stretch there, the broken definition. Yeah.
Yeah. So very simple and hard to answer. Well, not hard to answer, but why bother testing at all? Why don't we just push everything right to LMD?
Yeah, good point. Let's do that.
No, seriously, why?
I
test?
know. I'm kidding.
Discuss.
Well, I think that, I mean, for me, the main reason is because, I mean, it's not because I'm certainly not because I think I've posted one puzzle to testing that wasn't unique, right? So I mean, and that was like, I don't know if I had even test solved it myself. But like for me, I'm also posting to testing just because if the puzzle sucks and I don't realize it, which can happen, that's a pretty good venue to be told, like, hey, this was, really hard, or honestly, just anything other than glowing feedback from the testing feedback channel is probably like, oh, you probably shouldn't publish this. I mean, it almost feels like that sometimes.
Yeah, there are certainly some cases where, like, testing isn't only for does certain things about this puzzle work. There is an element of the quality of the puzzle in general. Like, I've posted over 150 puzzles in testing, and I've posted about 20 puzzles on LMD, maybe a few more. So, like, the ratio, like, that doesn't mean not all of them are bad, but it doesn't. It just, it's basically that I want to put these puzzles out there and find out how, like, you want to gauge some response about how much people enjoy them, and sometimes, like, they might just have a couple of cool steps, but actually it's not that cool a puzzle in general. It's not that smooth. It's not that interesting. And then there are some cases where, like, I've put out the puzzle. I thought, okay, I've got some testing on it. I'm not necessarily that happy with this version of the puzzle. And then I will go away, revamp the puzzle entirely, create an entirely new puzzle, but include a couple of cool logic steps in that, and then make a better puzzle later as a result. So I think testing is vital, really.
Yeah. And I think an important part of what we've discussed here is that I think knowing how well something is telegraphed or how smooth something is basically impossible to do yourself.
Yeah. Sorry, I spaced off. Did you just say that testing for smoothness is like hard to do yourself?
Impossible, really.
Well,
Okay, because I
not
absolutely
necessarily
agree.
smooth.
I absolutely agree. I think it's very hard. The main reason I think that that's so hard is because if you know the deduction that's next when you're testing, you're gonna find it quickly, right? So it's gonna the puzzle will. Well, if the puzzle doesn't flow when you are testing your own puzzle, then I wouldn't even. I mean, like if I'm testing my own puzzle in it and I am like clunking my way through it, I'm probably not even going to post it to testing, just because like,
Yeah.
well, if I'm struggling to see what's next, then I mean, what hope does someone else have? But most puzzles, yeah, it definitely like puzzles I set, they feel smooth. So definitely feedback on smoothness, on like just how long it, like you're not sitting there for 20 minutes between this step, and then a few steps later you're sitting there for 20 minutes again. Like that's not particularly enjoyable for a lot of people.
That's another thing I wanted to mention as well, is in terms of the testing. Like I do sometimes stream solve in the Discord in Voice Chat 1, but I do feel like I'm a very slow solver. So I do worry sometimes, am I just boring everyone here? Just taking so long to solve these puzzles when clearly people are thinking, oh, well, clearly, like people are shouting at your screen, oh, look, there's the deduction there. And it's just, it does feel I feel a little self-conscious when solving sometimes. Just really hard puzzles, I would say. Like 3 or below, I think that's fine to stream solve, for me at least, but it's
I
then a
have to
lot
be
harder
honest.
for about.
When someone streams all of my puzzle, I am not just sitting there only watching them solve the puzzle.
Yeah.
I'm
No, yeah.
doing other things while I am checking in every few seconds, and it's basically just to see like, are the steps being found? Are the steps in the order that I am doing them? If the person is talking, then for sure I'm watching every second of it, because I get to hear their thought process. And sometimes, depending on who it is, I will watch them intently. There are some people who are testing who have very indicative mouse movements. I think Kodak is one of these people who move their mouse in a very specific way, and I can almost see what they're thinking when he's like moving his mouse around and highlighting things and stuff. But a lot of people just don't do that at all. So I'm definitely not watching those people every second. So I don't think you need to feel
I'm told I do
self-conscious.
that, but I don't know.
I've built up a habit of doing that now, partially because I now try to record a lot of my solves, like as in I use the playback feature of CTC to have a time lapse of the solve, in the knowledge that selecting certain cells shows, like rather than just the mouse, just selecting the cells themselves shows, oh, that's where I'm looking in the puzzle. So now I've sort of built up that style of solving when I'm solving in person, like whether it's on Discord or wherever.
To
And I think,
clarify,
as you say, it's very good to see.
I was told quite a while ago that I did that. I may actually have gotten worse. I may have gotten worse at that as I've gotten faster. I don't know for sure, but I think it's helpful if you're streaming solving, and I do also actually appreciate Xeno's recorded solves. I've gotten a few of those. They're helpful. But yeah, I definitely think it's nice to, if you can track what they're thinking, either like through that or if they're talking, either one.
I definitely can't use that recorded feature because I know people in the stream know what I do when I'm thinking, and it's select cells and move in a circle rhythmically, and just select random cells. So then when I play back, it's like, what on earth is going on? He's just selecting a bunch of random cells. Oh, he accidentally put 9 in there. Oh, he deleted that. Okay. Yeah. So I definitely can't do that, but
I mean, yeah, after a certain amount of time, there's an element of that. Like, if I've been sitting in 10 minutes the same step, then all of a sudden I'm just sort of doodling with cells. And that's not exactly as helpful with the testing process. But yeah, I try to avoid that where possible.
Is there a time that you guys can remember that you got feedback from testing and you didn't use it? Like you just thought it was not a helpful thing?
I've got a very recent example of that in a way. The puzzle we mentioned earlier that I did change, like I would say it was still helpful feedback, but for the break-in of the puzzle, like I was getting the feedback that like a certain part of that puzzle is crowded, so people are very specifically looking there for the start, where that's not where the start is. And I kept on trying to think, like I was trying to think of various ways around it, trying to fix it, trying to change it, and no matter what I did, I just kept on thinking, this puzzle's just so good on its own merit. Like maybe it's just a too focused a mindset, but it's too like I thought there was too good a break-in, and those steps are important later on that I still had to have a little bit of a crowded section there. So even though I had that feedback from 2 to 3 people, they still enjoyed the puzzle, but they just weren't looking in the right place immediately at the start of the puzzle. And so basically that was slightly poor telegraphing on my part. I accept that, but I ended up choosing the fact that I thought the puzzle worked as it is. I mean, there were other people who were testing who didn't point that out and were fine with the break-in and did spot the break-in sort of more quickly. So I did have feedback from both sides on that. But there was definitely some feedback from testing that I wouldn't say I ignored because I actively tried to improve on it, but it turned out that I don't think I could have improved on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Kogisha,
Yeah,
do you have an example?
I don't I listen to most feedback. I could see definitely like Zeta saying you should post the harder version of the puzzle. I mean, no one's ever told me that. That's partially because I don't always tell people that there's a harder version of puzzles, which there usually is. But if they did, I would not listen to that.
Yeah,
Almost
no, I think that
undoubtedly.
might be a little bit like when you include things that aren't necessary for uniqueness or even for human solvability, but just to help like little handicap features or telegraphing features, and people say, well, I didn't use this, so you should just remove it.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, you may not have used it, but there may, it's like, say if it's a 3 out of 5 puzzle or something, there may be, several ways to progress, and the way you went just didn't happen to use that clue. I mean, it's hard to say. I think you want all your clues to be used too, but I think that one person not using a clue doesn't necessarily mean that that clue's useless, because sometimes you use clues inadvertently, like you don't even notice you're using them, like very subtly.
I think that you're right about the difficulty. I think the difficulty makes a big difference there, because like there were definitely some of my 3 out of 5 puzzles that I've probably like added maybe one extra given or one extra constraint that technically isn't needed, but it does improve the smoothness and the flow of the overall puzzle for most people. So that's the thing, is that even though there are some people who think, oh, well, you could do this harder. Actually, I've got a very good example of it. My glass numbered rooms puzzle, it has, there are no 2x2 rules. Sorry, no 2x2 rules. No 2x2 regions in the puzzle. But a few people weren't noticing that rule at all, or just completely forgot it. And technically, it's not required for the solve. But it does, like, it changes it from a 4 out of 5 puzzle to a 5 out of 5 puzzle. So people are literally doing a challenge version of this one puzzle when they don't notice it. And only about 3 or 4 people have actually done that. But technically that wasn't required, but it does make it a lot more of a grindy process. Like, it's just so much smoother with it than without it. So
Well, and,
even though it wasn't strictly necessary, I wanted to make sure it was still there.
Yeah, on Starity, the chaos construction I just published, and a bunch of people are really liking it. I mean that puzzle that puzzle is what I mean, an easier version, air quotes. I mean, the harder version. So there's a given in that puzzle that it's just not necessary. I mean, it's not necessary, right, for the puzzle to function, but without it, the puzzle is just not good. So like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna remove that. First of all, I don't think anyone would ever notice that that the puzzle was solvable without that. But even if they did, there's no way I would get rid of it. I mean, I think that a puzzle being overclued isn't necessarily bad, because the puzzle, an overclued puzzle can still be hard, to be honest. You just want people to look in the right places.
Oh, definitely.
Well, I had a recent experience where I was watching someone solve a puzzle, and I noticed that they were like specifically not touching a specific line that seemed like the shortest line, and I was kind of like, oh, I kind of understand why you're doing that, and I really don't kind of like why you're doing that. And I asked, like, are you trying to not use this line because you think that it could be unique without it? Because it isn't. And in fact, there is a 5-cell line in the puzzle that is not necessary for it to be unique, but it makes a much better solve path. So not the 3-cell line, but the 5-cell line is actually the one that is the extra clue. But I don't know, would you ever do that in a test solve? Try to avoid using something?
No, not me. I mean, I could see people doing that, but not me. I am already prone to giving up on puzzles anyway. So if I'm I want to try to go through what the setter intended. Like if they have a clue, it's there for a reason, presumably. I'm not just gonna be like, oh, I bet this clue isn't necessary. It's like, okay, but that they're not asking you to test it without that clue, right?
Yeah, I think that there was, unless a setter has specifically, explicitly mentioned, oh, this is unique without this one thing. If they've mentioned that, then sometimes it's interesting to experiment to see how possible it really is. But for the most part, I would say no. You're generally using every clue that's available to you, unless it's explicitly mentioned that they're not needed for whatever reason.
Actually, vault construction also has a clue that's not necessary. One of the three.
Yeah, I know. It makes it smoother.
I think overcluing. I think having a clue that's not necessary. That's not. So you shouldn't be looking for unnecessary clues, because you're not even. As a setter, I'm not looking to get rid of clues. That's not why I'm submitting something to testing, is to see if there are clues that aren't necessary. That's certainly far off. That's well beyond what I'm thinking about.
Well, it has gone the other way as well. Like, as a setter, when some people have tested, and then from them testing, like when you're watching them in the voice chat, then there are some cases where I've then thought, oh, well, actually, if I added an extra consecutive dot there, that would make this much smoother. So I've then ended up doing that, for example. I think that has helped as well. Like, you can add extra clues that weren't technically required, but do make it smoother as a result.
Nell's saying one issue is that sometimes overcluing can make the puzzle harder, since it can be tougher to draw the solver's attention to where they should look next. I actually completely disagree. Overcluing, I often overclue to telegraph something specifically. And that's why I try to put more things in this area, because I want, like, if I put a given in, you're immediately going to think, how do I use this given? This is the easiest thing to use. How am I going to use it? And I did that recently with
by the way.
Sorry?
I don't do that, by the way, but go on.
I recently put a given into a digit, or a given digit into a puzzle that was like way too hard to break into, and I gave the digit that makes you think, oh, I bet this is going to do that, and then it does. So you telegraph.
Yeah, I mean, I do that. I think that I think it depends how you do it, right? If you're over cluing by adding like a bunch of little killers or something, then I mean, yeah, that's not going to add clarity to most puzzles.
Yeah.
But like if your over clues, if your overclued clues are substantive, you know, if they are providing some information, you know, something that the solver can use to either learn or to, you know, it's like a small little shortcut to not have to fully vet out every possibility. That can be like really, really helpful, I think.
I think that like there's an element of overcluing. It depends how crowded the puzzle already is, I suppose. Like I think some people's definition of overcluing are going to be different to others. Like, yes, you can overclue to a minor extent, and if you overclue to a major extent, then it's a problem because then you're ruining the telegraphing. Like, if you put too many clues in, then people are looking in too many places because it's too crowded. But for the most part, I don't think that's a problem because most puzzles, like, I don't think, from what I've seen anyway, in my experience, there aren't a lot of incredibly crowded puzzles out there. There are a few, but usually that's the gimmick of the puzzle. Like,
yeah, I am not told very often. I think that Doubler Renbon had a lot of clues. Like that was a lot of information to process, but that is not something I'm guilty of very often, is being like, oh, I had way too much to look at. That's not something I have to deal with very often.
At the moment, I'm still trying to aim for that completely empty grid. So I'm going on the path of fewer clues, not more, at the moment.
I think that you know, like, I mean, I will overclue something and it'll still look pretty sparse. Sometimes, like, I mean, that's.
But one thing I recommended to you with Vault Constructs, the fact that because you initially put a couple of ones in as givens, and I just said, well, change them to single pink cages because single pink cages have to have one in them anyway, so it makes it look more sparse.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, I think that the willingness to add clues, like, I mean, if there's, you know, this actually goes back to a question you asked me earlier, ma'am, about, you know, what do I do if there is a step I really don't like? I mean, sometimes just adding a given. I mean, I think the stigma against givens is just they are definitely unfairly maligned. I think that if you can find a given to add that makes a step unnecessary and doesn't affect the rest of the puzzle, you know, if there's a step that's bad and you can just literally just skip it, that can be like almost optimal. You know, I mean, it's hard to find better than that if it doesn't affect the rest of the puzzle.
Pretty much exactly what I did. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I would say that's one of the most utilized ways of a given. Like, most people would utilize it to skip a step. I think a given is stigmatized in more senses than that, and I think it's much more useful than people find it. But I definitely think that usually the easiest way to skip a step is to skip the step that gives you the digit in that cell by giving the cell, right? Like, that's just
at least something very close to it. Yeah. So yeah, in the it's exactly what happened. Like, I showed Fahrenheit's vision earlier on the stream. That one single given 8. For so long, obviously, I was desperately trying not to have a given number at all, but the given 8 just made it so much smoother. It skipped about 2 incredibly annoying steps, and then I got a debut at 100% with it after I did that. So, I mean, I can't complain at all about adding a given to make things smoother, because it really made a massive difference to that puzzle.
I think vault construction, I added the other 3, not even to skip a step. I don't think it actually. I don't even remember thinking it skipped anything. I think I added it just because I liked having a little box of numbers. I'm sure that probably sounds silly, but I liked having a little square of digits. I mean, that
Mentioned
sounds silly
symmetry
saying
earlier.
it, but
Is that how you set whack too? Is that how you set whack too? Does it just look like a nice pattern of givens?
no, that is not how I set whack. I mean, I wanted the digits in those places, but no, those digits are necessary 100%.
Yeah, Mythclown mentioned earlier about an exception being symmetry. And there is that to an extent, if, like, this was for given specifically, I think it was in reference to forgiven digits. So the notion that you're putting one digit somewhere, and then in the opposite corner of the grid or whatever, you're putting a digit that isn't actually useful. But for me, at least, I sort of work on them in tandem. So I sort of work out, well, what do both of them do? Like, I don't just add one thinking, oh, that improves the puzzle, so now there goes an extra given. I always think about the impact of what both of them do, and then I'll figure out like multiple places for reflective givens all around the grid to see how much of a difference it makes, if that's the type of puzzle that I'm going for. So I do think that the symmetry, it still has to be considered when you're setting the puzzle, just for the aesthetic purposes, but specifically that does have to be considered in terms of the solve path as well. Like, you can't just throw in extra givens and hope for the best. At least not in my experience.
Yeah, that would be very odd. I often find that newer setters, just like we were talking about with difficulty creep, newer setters have sort of been raised by Father Mark and Father Simon to set very difficult puzzles. How do we stop new setters from making puzzles just absurdly hard without sort of scaring them into thinking that they're doing it wrong and that we're better than them or something like that, without maligning them, essentially?
I think that's pretty hard. That's definitely a very hard question to answer, because they might be setting puzzles because they want to set something really, really hard,
Usually.
They want to be ambitious. I see no reason for them not to be ambitious. But it's when the problem I think you're referring to is if they think that they can only, or that they feel like they should set something hard. And as long as they don't feel that, that's okay. But I do see that that's a difficult thing to steer people towards, because I mean, most people, I feel like, I mean, I didn't, but most people, I think, join the community as a result of the Miracle Sudoku. So when people see the Miracle Sudoku, they think, oh, well, I want to set something like that. And then they think, well, okay, it's not even that hard, but it seems hard to set. And then they think, oh, well, they may look at some other puzzles that they've done on the channel. And then they see the really cool hard ones, and then see Simon reacting like, oh, take a bow and everything. And then think, oh, yeah, no, I want that. And so they think, yeah, as you say, they sort of feel like they have to sort of jump to the hard puzzles.
Well, I think it's very difficult to set a good hard puzzle, and I think it's very difficult to set a good easy puzzle. I think it's much easier to set an average difficulty great puzzle that has like one really cool step, and then everything else is just normal.
And that's basically what I did for the first, like, after that initial puzzle I mentioned. After that, then I was basically just doing 2 and 3 difficulty puzzles for about 3 months, just solidly. Like those were the ones, and as you say, just like both of the like I've only ever set 2 classics, and those 2 classics are both effectively one-steppers. I think one's a one-stepper and one's a two-stepper. So all that is like one's spotting an X-wing and one's I can't even remember now. That's not good, is it? But anyway, it's so basically, yeah, as you say, it's a matter of you try to include 1 or 2 cool steps in your puzzles, and that generally means it ends up being 3 out of 5 difficulty. But then it was literally just a matter of practice for me. It was like months and months of practice of creating more and more puzzles, and slowly but surely it then creeped up from 3 to 4, and then all the puzzles I was setting was 4, and then gradually further from that, now pretty much all the puzzles I'm setting are 5 out of 5. It's just that's what's happened for me. But I would say that if you're aiming to set 5 out of 5 puzzles, don't set out to try to set 5 out of 5 puzzles. Most of my 5 out of 5 puzzles are 4 out of 5 puzzles that or were aimed to be 4 out of 5 puzzles that ended up being 5 out of 5. So I think if you're just starting out setting, don't be afraid of it. Certainly be ambitious if you want to be, and you can definitely find new and fun stuff in easy puzzles as well as hard ones. Like you don't have to do hard ones.
Well, I think it's a little bit easier said than done, though. I mean,
Oh, definitely.
like puzzles are hard. A puzzle can be hard because when you're like, for me at least, when I'm setting, I'm kind of solving while I'm setting, right? You're trying to find steps that are meaningful and logically sound. But yeah, Riff says it nice. You don't set anything you can't solve yourself. I'm going through the puzzle and I'm trying to solve it. But if you're new setting, if you're new to setting, it's going to be a bit different because you're not sure how far you should be looking ahead. Like if let's say you look ahead like really far for a step, and you're like, you have no basis to know. Like, I mean, is that fun, or would people have fun looking for that? I have no idea. If you're totally new, I think that's important to kind of recognize that. Just understanding like if you're setting, you kind of have to learn when a deduction just feels bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Comes from
really
a
the
lot of
feedback.
experience.
The feedback that you get from testing essentially is how you learn whether something feels wrong or feels right.
Right.
Now this actually comes back to another thing we were talking about earlier, is this stigmatization against given digits. Why is there a stigma against given digits? Like, why can't newer setters use given digits? They don't.
Yeah.
Often they don't. Why can't they just use them to make their lives easier? You've already filled in like 4/81ths of the puzzle if you have 4 given digits, right? That's much
It's
easier.
because it's more visually striking if there's fewer givens. I mean, that's the obvious answer, right?
Right.
I think
But of course, I agree with you.
I think the stigma is slightly more skewed towards if it would otherwise be an empty grid, it's putting 1 given in. I think that's the problem. If it's 2 or more givens, I think it's fine. I think the stigma comes from like if there's only 1 given there, why is it there? Like it puts all the attention on that when that might not be the focus of the puzzle at all. So I think I
Well,
understand why people are concerned about having 1 single given.
Well, you're not going to get any clickbait by saying 0 given digits in the grid. There has to be 1 or 2 or only 4 given digits,
Yeah, no, if you're specifically aiming for the CTC video, why do you think they want an empty grid?
That's something to be noted as well, is that new setters, a lot of times there are people who even hop in the voice chat and they're like, oh, I joined this community because I want a puzzle to get featured. And it's like, I mean, that's not that uncommon even. Like, I mean, when I joined the community, I was like, oh, it'd be cool to get featured. Yeah, I want to work towards that. But it's not necessarily the healthiest goal, right? I mean, if you're trying to make puzzles that get featured, you're really, I mean, I think this was mentioned last setting stream. that Clover made a point about, it's not necessarily good to set puzzles for for an audience of just Simon Anthony. That's not, you want to, you may want to try to set for a larger audience than just one person.
I think that it's. I think that it's fine as a goal. I don't think it's fine as the only goal. Like, I think it's okay to say, oh, well, I'd like a CCC feature, but also, I mean, ideally, you just want to be creating good puzzles for people to have fun with. So, yes, I really wanted a CCC feature, but I wasn't only creating puzzles for a result of having a CCC feature.
Yeah, I guess that's the distinction. I mean, and I do want to clarify. So, like Zeta, yeah, I would say that almost everyone, when they first start setting, they're like, oh yeah, I mean, they'd be, everyone would like some recognition for their efforts. So, and it's nice to get that kind of attention, positive feedback and attention. But there are some people, I think, who set for the sole purpose of trying to get featured, and I don't think I don't think that it's certainly not an end that justifies all means.
I think the proof of that. Sorry, go on.
If you're setting puzzles that are the type of puzzle that you think will get featured, that is the problem, I think.
You don't want to only be setting puzzles that you think deserve a feature. If you start thinking you deserve features, then there's a big problem.
I mean, not to call anyone out, but
here we go.
not to call anyone out, but I honestly don't even remember the guy's name. But I was just looking at just the other day in the Ask Simon and Mark channel when Simon had commented on Udakos's puzzle, saying like, "Oh, that one was so hard, but like, please, setters, can we please just have like easier puzzles with this much beauty?" And I said like, "Oh my God, I hate that so much. Why would you even say that? Harder doesn't equal better, and there are so many easy puzzles with nice logic." And okay, here's the guy's name. Joda Awu or something. He made like the givenless empty grid Sudoku or something.
The one with the ridiculous rule set of telling you exactly what to do on every cell or whatever.
Every box had a different rule set, and they all told you what to do with the box. It was like prime numbers, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think that was ridiculous. That puzzle is madness.
Anyways, he commented on what I said, and honestly, I don't understand what he was talking about at all, but I DM'd him because I was trying to be nice. And now I'm not being nice, of course. But I DM'd him to talk to him about what he had said, and what I had said, and why I said it. And he basically responded by saying, well, of course, everyone is making puzzles to get featured. So, therefore, you should make puzzles that are harder because puzzles that are harder get featured. And I just lost my mind because I just couldn't understand how someone could like have this perspective. Like he was saying that his puzzle, the empty grid Sudoku, which is, I thought it was a cool enough puzzle. I didn't think it was a special puzzle. But I think it was an all right puzzle. It seemed pretty fun. It's a cool idea. He said, oh, it's like in the top 15 or something most viewed puzzles of CTC, and he was saying how great it is that like harder puzzles or more striking puzzles are getting more attention, and you should be making more striking puzzles to get attention.
You'll be glad to hear, Beam, that the puzzle that Simon featured today while you've been streaming is a 1 out of 5 puzzle.
Oh yeah, I did see that.
I have a 1 out of 5 puzzle that I'm thinking about publishing.
I've now got the highest 1 out of 5 puzzle rated on LMD, and I'm very happy about it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, 97%. I was very, very pleased with that. But we'll see what happens after. I mean, it's got 33 souls at the moment. We'll see what happens when it gets to 100 or whatever to see when people ruin it. But you never know. I'm happy with it now.
Now, Zeta Math, I actually don't think there is that distinction between beautiful and fun, and the harder puzzles tend to be beautiful and easier puzzles tend to be more fun. I think fun is a subjective thing, and a lot of beauty is subjective in a way, but also there is an objectiveness to the beauty of a puzzle. I think there are certain metrics you can assign to how beautiful a puzzle is, and I don't think that easy puzzles are necessarily less beautiful than hard puzzles in general.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's like something can be. I think that it's certainly possible for puzzles to be both quite easy and also quite beautiful, just in like, it's like it's just like, very just very cool and engaging to figure out why something works. Even, I mean, even if it's not hard to actually work out that it works, but it can still be fun to kind of go through that process.
I think there are
Well,
so many beautiful.
beauty isn't
Sorry,
necessarily fully objective, but there
no,
are
not fully
certainly
objective.
certain qualities that that people kind of tend to describe as more beautiful, like novel deductions tend to get described that way. Sparse grids tend to get described that way, or symmetry. In a lot of ways, symmetry can be. A lot of people find that appealing. I don't know. I think that what I would say about the beauty and fun, objectivity or subjectivity, is I would say that they're both fairly subjective, but that they're subjective in different ways. I mean, you could have someone who thinks that a puzzle is fun but not really very beautiful. They just kind of flew through it. But then you could have someone else who thought that the same puzzle was beautiful but not very fun. I mean, that seems like it'd be a little hard to achieve, but there's certainly that possibility there.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I used to focus a lot on the aesthetics because I always thought about presentation is very key in terms of making something appealing to solve. So I used to focus a lot on sort of making things artistic. A lot of my earlier puzzles I would always be making like a thermo puzzle, but the thermos would always draw something out that made it look appealing, or I'd make it somehow symmetrical in some way that makes it appealing. So I think that beauty in that sense helps to an extent just to get people's feet in the door, as it were. I think I've steered away from that a bit more now, possibly just because I'm a little more well known within the community, so I'm more willing to put out what is objectively, in terms of aesthetics, an ugly puzzle, in the hope that a few people will think, oh well, this is actually like, it looks ugly, but it probably is quite cool. So they try it, they think it's cool, then I might end up posting it on LND, and then it gets enough ratings to then see that people think, oh well, actually it's a 98% puzzle. Maybe I should try it, even though it doesn't necessarily look fantastic. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But so yeah, you were going to say something new.
Oh, I don't even remember what I was going to say. But we should probably get back to talking about test solving puzzles, because all of a sudden we've gone off the rails, and I started shit talking someone.
How dare you?
Someone
weren't going to call out and then went and found their name.
Yes, exactly. But I don't care. I had an argument with this person, so I'm over it.
That was such an absurd conversation.
It was ridiculous. Anyways, I honestly just feel like it's a joke now. So, like, I don't really feel like I'm really bashing him. It's just a joke. But I haven't asked this question, and I think it's kind of pertinent because I don't know if sorry, I'm just laughing, Sam. That's something funny. Do you test solve a puzzle yourself just once, Or do you test solve it multiple times? Do you do it consecutively over multiple days?
Depends on the puzzle, but for the most part, more than once. On almost every puzzle I create, I do it more than once through.
A lot of times it also depends actually when I finish setting, in terms of not in terms of how many times I test solve, but in terms of how spaced out it is. Sometimes I will test solve it, and then I might wait till that evening. Like when I say when I finish, I mean like literally the time of day. If I finish setting a puzzle, say at 1 p.m., I might test solve it and then test solve it again at 6 p.m. and then post it to testing and test solve it again. Or, it's like, it kind of just depends on the puzzle in terms of how much I test solve it. Like I test solve Killer Shikoku many, many times, as an example.
Right. I think it really
because-
depends on the puzzle, and like you're saying, if I've spent a really long time setting it, I will spend a lot of time solving it, usually, because I've
think you're
usually
right.
forgotten the beginning enough that I have to test solve it multiple times. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, there is a certain element as well of, depending on how difficult the puzzle is or how much time you've put into it. It's not to say that, like, I've definitely created good puzzles in shorter periods of time. It does definitely show that the quality of my puzzles are higher for the ones I put in more time for. Overall, in terms of whether it's setting and testing and everything. The other thing is testing as you go along, which I think some people don't do. I think you should. I was watching Guckles doing a setting stream the other day, and yeah, he's constantly testing every moment. Like he thinks of a deduction, will consider the deduction, and then he might go back to the very beginning and keep on testing from the beginning again to see how it works. And I think, maybe I don't do it as much as that, but I think definitely testing multiple times at multiple stages of the setting process is important, not just at the end or just at the beginning or whatever.
I definitely agree with that. There's been so many times that in the past where I have set an entire puzzle in like one sitting and then try to test solve it, and I'm like, I hate this break-in, and then I have to garbage the rest of the puzzle. But if I had just stopped at right after the break-in, tested it, and then looked at it, thought about it, I would have realized that I could change it a little bit, and then I would ignore so much of the pain that I spent trying to make it work with the other stuff.
I think there were certainly times where it's a problem where certain deductions are relying so heavily on an early deduction, which is a bit of a problem in some instances. But yeah, so the testing is obviously important for that. But also, there's the problem of over-testing. Now, I don't want to discourage anyone from testing a lot. Testing's great. But I've definitely got to the stage with some of the puzzles that I've created over many weeks in a couple of cases, where I've tested it so many times that I then think, is this actually fun? Like, is there any fun still in this? But it's because I've done it 50 times already that I've forgotten that I loved the initial deduction or whatever, and then I don't know what to do about that, because there are some instances where I might even go to someone in private and just say, what do you think about this? And just double check I'm not going crazy, because if I'm just doing it all by myself, it's a problem. So I might go to someone for initial testing just to double check I'm not going crazy. But there are some puzzles I've just had to scrap.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, like for me anyways, if I am setting something for a really long time, Whack was a little different, because Whack, I felt like I was setting from scratch about 20 times. But like if I'm setting a puzzle for a really long time, there may be a really hard step, and that I found, say, fairly early. And after 10 hours later, after I've done that step literally 100 times as I've tried to, retest, kind of recreate the steps to get to the part that I'm setting, it might feel very easy. And maybe I've forgotten that step actually was brutal. And, then you post it to testing and people are like, wow, this was insane, which is exactly what happened with Starity. So, which I then fixed.
I've certainly had that before as well, where like there's a certain step that you initially think, oh, that was actually quite a tricky step, and then after 2 or 3 more solves or tests, then you're thinking, oh, this is easy, really. I don't know why anyone wouldn't spot this obvious step that's clearly a 1 out of 5 step when actually it's a 5 out of 5 step that no one in my mind would normally spot. So, yeah.
One thing I did want to mention during this stream that I don't think I have mentioned is that I think a lot of people, well, I don't know if a lot of people do this, but I think a natural reaction to feeling like a puzzle wasn't something that you'd enjoy, and then the setter taking your feedback, trying to make the puzzle better, coming back to testing, posting the puzzle is to say, well, I didn't like that puzzle before, I don't want to do it again. I think that's honestly the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be trying to encourage people to change their puzzles to be better, to respond to feedback. And that's always what I've been trying to do the entire time I've been in this community, is trying to reward the behavior of making the puzzle the best that it can be.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there are some people in the community who are, I'm not going to name names. There are some people in the community who I think are a little too focused on the notion of, right, this is exactly how I want it, let's present it to the world. And that they have people test it, but then they don't necessarily do any changes or tweaks at all because they were so focused, like so single-mindedly focused on, this is exactly how I wanted it. And I think that that's not, like, you have to have some flexibility. Like, there are certainly some puzzles of mine that I've revamped over and over again, and there are others that I've just left exactly as they are. So you have to have, it's just based on the feedback, you have to actually listen to the feedback you're getting. Like, there's no point throwing something in testing if you're not going to listen to the feedback at all. I think there are a couple of people who maybe they just think, oh, well, this is such a good puzzle in of itself, and no matter what anyone says, I think this is too good a puzzle. So one of them's me. No, sorry.
I wanted to address something Zetaman's talking about like hard questions. I mean, that's exact, like Starity, it had an impossibly hard question. Extremely simple answer. I mean, it was 2 questions right in a row you had to ask that were both very random and very hard to think about. And it's like, it's very hard to realize when you're setting if there's a step that's been baked into the solve for the past, however many steps you've been adding in, say 30 steps. It's pretty hard to lose sight of, like, yeah, why would the solver ever ask this question in this situation with all of these other clues now added into the grid?
Yeah, I don't know how that particular step that you're talking about in Starity, it just clicked with me so fast. But like watching.
Well, not even that step. I'm talking about with the 9.
That stuff still in the puzzle?
No, it's not. No, I got rid of it.
Good. Well, there's the other step that's also like, it's a hard question to ask.
That's a hard question. That's a 10 times easier question than the one with the 9.
That's just a random question. It's not even like, yeah.
Yes,
No.
it is the step. Only K and T was subject. I explained the step to Memerister, but
I found the
yeah,
step
only
too.
K and T actually had to try to solve it.
You forgot the step. I found it.
I didn't forget it.
The 9? I thought you did.
No. Oh well, yeah. No, I did forget. No, because you never finished that puzzle. You never finished the first version.
No, I didn't.
So we never found it together. We both just totally missed it. Then I remembered it later, I guess. I'm assuming that's what we were missing. But yeah, no, KNT, and that was a red flag. Obviously, like I have you test the puzzle, and I literally can't remember a step. That's instant major red flag. I mean, so I knew I had some work to do right as soon as that happened.
Yeah.
So, as we're talking about sterity and we're talking about feedback and testing, just to put you really on the spot, Kagito, how valuable was my testing of it? Like, how did you respond to that testing? What did you think of the test, the feedback? Was it useful? Wasn't it useful? Just out of interest. Be as brutal as you like. It was such forgettable testing, it turns out.
To be honest, okay, so you've put me on the spot, and
I know, and I'm sorry.
I don't mind. To be honest, I was already fairly confident in the puzzle by the time you tested it. So because I removed the only part of it that I didn't like, really. I mean, so
I was already in the second round of testing.
I mean, if it was like miserable for you, then it would have been more. It would have been more informative for me. Thankfully, it wasn't. So I think the only sort of information I could have gotten from you would have been like, yeah, that puzzle sucked. Like that was way too much. That I would have, that I would have. That would have been more impactful, but not necessarily in a good way. I mean,
so if hypothetically I'd have said it sucked, I mean, I'd like to think I would have given some sort of constructive feedback rather than just it sucked. But still, just hypothetically in that case, would that then make you think, okay, I'm going to scrap the puzzle? Or do you think you'd then try and work on it more to improve it?
Oh, I would just work on it at that point. I mean, because there's no scrapping that puzzle. That puzzle, those stairs are there. They're
We're
not
talking about beauty. I mean, it's a very good view. Like,
and Riftline also staggered had Riftline was subjected to a pretty brutal step from staggered that I also got rid of. Yeah, that's true. The middle digit in staggered was maybe one of the harder broken 159 deductions I've seen. And it was right after that variant became a thing. So I think that was like way too much for that point in time.
Bean, are there any specific puzzles you can think of that you made? I know you haven't put any in testing for a while, as you said, but are there any specific ones that you've made that you think that testing made a big impact for?
Good question.
Here I am, just the hard-hitting questions from me today. Really putting people on the spot. I'm the hard interviewer.
I don't know. I mean, I honestly feel like I'm such a not I'm not responsive to testing feedback very well. People will say like, "Oh, I loved the puzzle," and then I will never look at it again.
Yeah, I know that feeling as well.
Because I didn't love the puzzle as much as they did. I think that's a weird part of testing for me is that when they seem to love the puzzle more than I do, I don't like that. I don't know why.
I understand that. I get that.
But
It feels surreal, doesn't it? Yeah.
what puzzle had huge impact with testing?
Or what was that?
I'm just trying to think
Oh.
of the answer to the question.
We've both frozen, apparently, according to chat.
I think they're good now. Oh no, you're
Well,
frozen.
fine on the Discord, but on screen on the stream, apparently not.
Oh, yeah, you're
I
frozen.
think it unfroze.
There we go. I don't know. I don't trust people in testing.
I mean, I definitely have some reservations. Like I said, I find if someone did bifurcate, that's useless. To me, that's useless. So I have some reservations if it's like someone completely random saying like, you know, you kind of have to pay attention to what they're saying specifically, like, and kind of try to assess it. Like, okay, well, does that even make sense? Like, does that make me think that they actually understood what was even happening, or what? Like, or does it kind of feel like they maybe just uh, you know, did some case testing and then, you know, the case test made the step way easier than it actually was supposed to be or something? Like if someone says like if there's a puzzle that's really hard but it has like a way to get past a really hard step by case testing, and then someone's like, oh yeah, this puzzle was very easy for me, I'm probably going to assume that they were just case testing it and probably just ignore it.
I think I try and maybe I shouldn't, I don't know, but I try to question people a bit more in that instance. If they like, I try to get a little more information about them from the test. If I feel like the testing feedback hasn't really given me anything to work with or any solid information, then I feel like it's fine just to go and chat to them more in DMs, really. So I try and find out a little more about how they're solving.
I always appreciate getting puzzle feedback in DMs and not in the channel, because then I can actually talk to them. You know, like I don't know. So I always like hearing, like, if I receive a DM, like, and it's like say like I receive a DM from someone I don't know, and it's a screenshot of the solved puzzle, and they're like, oh, you know, and then they say like, oh, this is really nice. Then I can like have a conversation with them about what they liked and what they didn't. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas it feels a little weird for like someone to give me feedback in the feedback channel and then me DM them, be like, feels like I'm like interrogating them or something. I don't know if that
I do finally have an answer to your question, Xeno. I think
Okay.
it's kind of weird. The only instances I can remember of I don't know if I can hear you guys right now because
We're fine.
okay, my headphones are dying, but it's okay. Is Codec often gives me very honest feedback about puzzles, and it's while he's doing them. Well, not often recently, but because he's been on vacation, I've been on vacation, I've posted puzzles recently, but and he doesn't like chaos construction, and I've been doing that before then. But anyways, he often gives me really good feedback, and often really good feedback in terms of like what you could do differently, sort of feedback. And he'll even open it up in F puzzles, for example, and look at it, which is super helpful. And he'll be like, "Oh, if you just exchange row 7 with row 9, and then it's much easier, and you don't require as many clues." And I'm like, "How on earth did you think about that? Think of that at all?" But maybe he can explain that more when we have him on to interview. But yeah, I think feedback from people who have solved it on sort of like the video or the voice call is much more useful for me. I usually don't even trust people who give me feedback through the testing submission thing. it is often wrong or slightly inaccurate, and I often change the puzzle even though they have told me it's fine. I kind of feel bad doing that, but it's just how it is.
I'll change the puzzle even if you guys tell me it's fine. Like even if I'll puzzle is always subject to change for me, but yeah, I don't know. Like there may be a step that people are like, oh, I think that's okay, and I'll be like, I may ponder it for a day and then be like, no, I'm getting rid of that.
Right.
Yeah.
That does happen
I think
for me.
you need some time away from puzzles occasionally just to think about, like, just process them in your mind as to what's good and what's bad. Like sometimes you'll initially think, oh, this is brilliant, and then like a few hours later you think, actually, that's not that special. That bit of that puzzle, like it can go really in favor of something better. After
Yeah.
initially thinking, wow, amazing.
It is a little awkward though, because I never know. So I never know if, so let's say someone tested like 8-color theorem. This is a good example. 8-color theorem. I set 8-color theorem, right? And then I was like, okay, I want to do this better. I want to do it better. Because there was a deduction in there that I just didn't like. I thought it was just kind of just really weird. And so I made like pretty substantial changes to it. I mean, like it was literally just a different. I mean, the puzzle looked way different, and like so. Oh well, Playmaker just showed up because he's the one who tested the original version of 8-color theorem. It's kind of awkward. It's like I'm not sure. Like I post the new version of 8-color theorem. Do I ask him to test this new 5 out of 5 puzzle, or do I tell him the solution and be like, hey, I know you already solved like a substantially similar puzzle that is slightly different, but I don't know. It's just kind of weird. If you make changes, do you ask them to resolve the puzzle, or I've always kind of fumbled with that.
Depends how big a change. It depends how big a change you've made. I mean, if you're, as you say, if it's really different, then I think it's almost a different puzzle and probably does need resolving in a way.
Yeah, I did. I made him resolve it. So
yeah. But if there were just a couple of minor changes, like there was one, I can't even remember which particular puzzle it was, but there was one puzzle that someone solved that was an early version, and then I basically changed one minor thing that then swapped about 6 digits in the grid. Like, I'm not going to ask them to do the whole puzzle again for the sake of 6 digits. So, yeah, I just said a few. I mean, I did ask them specifically whether they wanted to solve the new version or whether they wanted the solution code, and I was happy to give them solution code, even though it was slightly different from the version that they ended up completing. But yeah, if it's a massive change, then I think it needs to be resolved.
I have to address Ambrose's comment because yes, I want to reiterate that I think that not necessarily doing it a hard way, but I mean if they're bifurcating my puzzle, I would prefer that they told me they couldn't do it than bifurcate my puzzle and give me feedback, to be honest. I mean that's just how I feel. So for me, yeah, that is, I'm not saying I don't appreciate testing, but if you're gonna case test the puzzle, that's just it's not informative for me. So that's just how I feel about it.
And to be clear from before, because I don't want people to think that I'm not appreciative of tests. I do appreciate tests in the testing submissions. I just I don't think that any feedback that I've gotten has really impacted my decisions in that way. It has certainly impacted, like, if I get great feedback and I trust the people, then I'll be happy with the puzzle. And sometimes I'll change it and sometimes I won't. And it's not that I don't trust the people in testing feedback. There's sometimes it's not exactly completely accurate. And we've talked about why that is for many reasons. Lots of imposter syndrome, lots of not thinking that you did it the right way or whatever. But I don't want people to think that I don't value their solves, because I do. And the feedback.
do you trust people who are setters more than people who are just solvers, out of interest?
No, I mean,
No, I wouldn't say so.
yeah, I might trust them. You know, I might ask someone who I know sets puzzles if I should change something. But in terms of if they enjoyed something, that's something that anyone can answer, I think.
I think in some ways that I think that it's good to have both, if possible. You have people who are just solvers and people who are setters as well, because that's sort of the ideal mishmash. Because if the people who are just solvers, they're just doing it for the enjoyment of it, and if they did enjoy your puzzle, that's excellent feedback. Whereas I feel like some people who are setters, they're sort of looking for more depth in your puzzles sometimes. So, I mean, that's good for feedback in a way as well, but it's just sort of different feedback, I think, in my experience.
Ambrose
All right.
brings up another good bifurcation. Sorry.
Go ahead.
About
Go ahead.
bifurcation being different for different people. And no, I mean, that's a good point, too. I'm mostly talking about exceptional cases, which are. There's no other way to describe it besides bifurcation that I would object to typically.
Fun path! A fun maze-like path through the puzzle.
All right. I love the discussion we're having, but it's actually almost 20 minutes over the time, so we'll probably stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was
Thank you
enjoying
very
it,
much
so-
for it.
Yeah, thank you guys for showing up, and thanks for talking and staying later than you had to. And thanks to Niverio and mathpesto for coming out as well. What was that?
I just said thanks for having me. Sorry, I didn't mean to kind of talk over you, but I definitely did.
No worries.
Do you know what the next discussion stream is going to be? Me?
I have a few options. One of them is telegraphing, which I think is a good candidate.
Yeah.
But I'll have to think on it a little bit.
Cool.
Oh, that'll be interesting. All right.
Thank you very much. We'll see you.
Bye, chat.
Was it a Tuesday for the codec, did you say? What day was that?
For the next stream is on Wednesday.
Wednesday. Cool. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Yeah, see you then. Thank you to Xeno and Kagisho for showing up, and for everyone for coming out. And that was a lot of fun. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed, and like the stream or video afterwards when it's uploaded, or however it works. And if you enjoyed and you thought this was interesting and you wanted to say something during this setting discussion, perhaps sign up for the next one, because you can always have your conversation as well be heard, and everyone has opinions that are valuable. And like, I didn't even know mathpesto had that situation. Like, that's crazy and very interesting and helpful to hear that discussion. So yeah, lots of things come out, and sign up if you're interested. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.